Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto became the Pirate King and was forced to marry a princess from every island? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sage of the Crimson Dawn. The first thing Naruto knew was salt. It was a harsh, stinging scent that scraped the back of his throat, a taste of grit on his tongue. He coughed, a racking heave that brought up seawater, and the world spun into a dizzying kaleidoscope of blue and white. Sand, coarse and unfamiliar, was ground into his cheek. He pushed himself up, his arms shaking not from weakness but from a deep, thrumming resonance of power that had nowhere to go. His memory was a fractured mirror, reflecting blinding light and a scream that might have been his own. Sasuke's face, contorted in a final, desperate struggle. Sakura's cry, the sickening tear of reality itself. And then, this. He stood, his black and orange clothes stiff with dried salt. Before him, an ocean stretched to an impossible horizon. A sheet of hammered sapphire under a sun that felt too warm, too close. It was a body of water so vast it made all the lakes and rivers of the elemental nations feel like puddles. He turned. Behind him, a dense, emerald jungle steamed with life, its edge giving way to the white sand beach where he'd washed ashore. He closed his eyes, drawing on a sense that was now as natural to him as breathing. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his very being. The life energy of this place flooded his senses. It was vibrant, wild, and utterly alien. The trees, the insects, the very air hummed with a different kind of chakra. No, not chakra. Something rawer, simpler. He could feel the small, scurrying lives in the jungle, the larger, swimming lives in the deep, but there was no network of shinobi. No familiar hum of a hidden village. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. He checked himself. The Six Paths Sage mode was a placid ocean within him, a permanent state of being since that final battle. He felt the 9 truth-seeking orbs, hovering in a conceptual space behind him, ready to be called upon. His body was a conduit for the life energy of the world, and T's new world was singing a song he didn't recognize. The power was there, all of it. He was a god in a land he did not know. The thought brought him no comfort, only a profound sense of dislocation. A well-worn path led from the beach into the jungle. With no other direction to take, he followed it. The air grew thick and humid, alive with the chatter of unseen creatures. He moved with a shinobi's silence, a ghost in the trees. His senses peeled for any sign of civilization. It didn't take long. The scent of wood smoke and cooked fish reached him, carried on the sea breeze. A village. It was nestled in a natural cove. A small collection of weathered wooden buildings clinging to the shore. A single stone pier jutted out into the water, where a brutish-looking ship was moored, its black flag, a grinning skull with crossed cutlasses, hanging limp in the heat. The village itself was quiet, but it was the wrong kind of quiet. It was the hush of a held breath, the silence of fear. He saw it in the faces of the people. A woman pulling her child close as she hurried indoors. An old man who met his gaze for a split second before looking away, his shoulders slumped in resignation. The place felt bruised, wounded. Naruto found a tavern, its sign a faded painting of a leaping fish. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of stale ale and despair. A few patrons sat hunched over their drinks, speaking in low murmurs. He took a seat in a shadowed corner, his sage's senses absorbing the emotional texture of the room. It was thick with resentment, helplessness, and a simmering anger that had long since lost its heat. He didn't have to wait long to understand why. The tavern doors slammed open, and sunlight flooded the room, silhouetting 3 large figures. The man in the center was a mountain of muscle and grime. His beard a matted tangle of black rope. A cruel, jagged scar ran from his temple to his chin, pulling one side of his mouth into a permanent sneer. He wore a heavy leather coat despite the heat, and a massive, chipped cleaver was strapped to his back. Tribute time. The man bellowed, his voice like rocks grinding together. RORG is here for his due. The tavern patrons flinched. The tavern keeper, a stout man with sweat beading on his bald head, began to tremble as he wiped down the bar with a rag. Captain RORG, the keeper stammered. You're You're early this week. Rorg laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. The boys are thirsty, and I have a new thirst of my own. The Crimson Dawn Fleet has expenses. He strode to the bar and slammed a gauntleted fist on the wood, making the bottles rattle. The usual, and a cask of your best for the ship. The Sea Vulture has a dry throat. One of his men, a lanky pirate with rotting teeth, grabbed a young woman who was serving drinks. She cried out as he pulled her against him. And what about our other thirsts, Captain? He sneered. Naruto watched, his face impassive. His fingers didn't twitch, his breathing didn't change. He simply observed, a still point in the swirling vortex of fear and malice. He felt the spike of terror from the girl, the wave of impotent fury from the tavern keeper, the greasy satisfaction from the pirates. It was a familiar ugliness, the kind he had fought his entire life. The strong preying on the weak. The tavern keeper wrung his hands. Please, Captain, we've given all we can. The fishing has been poor. Rorg's sneer deepened. He reached out and swept a dozen tankards off a nearby table. They shattered on the floor. Then you will give what you can't. That's how tribute works. He turned his gaze on the girl, who was now weeping silently. Perhaps she can pay in installments. That was it. The line, let her go, a quiet voice said. The tavern fell silent. Every head turned towards the corner where Naruto sat. A splash of orange in the dim light. Rorg squinted, then let out a bark of laughter. What did you say, you little gutter rat? Naruto stood up, moving out of the shadows. He wasn't particularly tall or broad, but he held himself with an unnerving stillness. His blue eyes, calm and ancient, held Rorg's gaze. I said, he repeated, his voice even but carrying an authority that cut through the room. Let her go. The pirate holding the girl shoved her away, and she scrambled behind the bar. He drew a rusty cutlass. You got a death wish, boy. Naruto didn't even look at him. His eyes remained fixed on Rorg. You have a choice, he said to the captain. You and your men can get back on your ship, and you can sail away and never come back. Or you can stay here. He let the unspoken threat hang in the air. For a moment, Rorg was actually taken aback by the sheer audacity. Then his face contorted with rage. Kill him, he snarled. The two pirates flanking him charged. The first swung his cutlass in a wide arc aimed at Naruto's neck. Naruto didn't seem to move. He simply wasn't there anymore. The blade sliced through empty air. The pirate grunted in confusion, stumbling off balance. A flicker of movement behind him, and a sharp chop to the back of the neck sent him crashing to the floor, unconscious. The second pirate, seeing his partner fall, hesitated for a fatal second. Naruto was already on him, a blur of motion. A palm heel strike to the chest, delivered with pinpoint accuracy and superhuman force, lifted the man off his feet and sent him flying backward into a wall, which cracked under the impact. He slid to the ground, out cold. It had taken less than 2 seconds. The tavern was dead silent, save for the ragged breathing of the patrons. Rorg's jaw was hanging open. He had seen bar fights, seen men killed with blades and fists, but he had never seen anything like this. It wasn't a fight, it was a dismissal. Naruto's gaze returned to him. Your choice, Captain. Rorg's shock gave way to a primal fury. He was Captain Gancleaver Rorg. He had butchered entire crews. He wouldn't be shown up by some strangely dressed stray. He let out a roar of pure rage and unslung the massive cleaver from his back. The weapon was more a slab of sharpened iron than a sword, easily 6 feet long and impossibly heavy. He held it in 2 hands, his knuckles white. I'll grind your bones into chum. He bellowed and charged. He was surprisingly fast for a man his size. He brought the cleaver down in a vertical chop meant to split Naruto in 2 from head to toe. The wind from the blow whistled through the room. Naruto simply held up a single hand. The cleaver, a weapon that could shear through a ship's mast, stopped dead. It rang like a struck bell. The vibrations running up Rorg's arms and rattling his teeth. It had connected with Naruto's open palm, and it had not moved him an inch. Rorg stared in disbelief, his eyes wide with the first real fear he had felt in years. He couldn't pull the weapon back. It was as if it were welded to the boy's hand. Naruto's expression was one of mild disappointment. He closed his fingers around the blade. There was a screech of protesting metal, and the thick iron of the cleaver began to bend and crumple in his grip as if it were cheap tin. "You made the wrong choice," Naruto said, his voice still unnervingly calm. He pushed. Rorg. A man who weighed over 300 pounds, was thrown backward as if he were a child's toy. He crashed through 2 tables before skidding to a halt near the tavern doors. He scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of terror and confusion, staring at the mangled ruin of his signature weapon. What are you?" he stammered. Naruto didn't answer. Instead, he raised his right hand. A low hum filled the air, and a swirling sphere of brilliant blue energy materialized in his palm. It spun with a furious, contained violence, a miniature hurricane of pure power. The light from it bathed the tavern in an azure glow. The pirates on Rourke's ship, hearing the commotion and peering in, gasped in shock. No one in the Grand Sea had ever seen magic like that. Rourke's bravado finally shattered. This wasn't a fighter. This was a monster, a demon. He turned and fled, scrambling out of the tavern and sprinting down the pier toward his ship. "Raise the anchor. Set sail," he screamed at his bewildered crew. Naruto lowered his hand, the Rasengan vanishing without a sound. He had no desire to kill the man. Humiliation and fear were more effective weapons. He had broken not just the captain's cleaver, but his spirit. A man like that ruled through an illusion of invincibility. That illusion was now gone. He turned back to the silent tavern. The keeper, the patrons, the young server girl, they were all staring at him, their expressions a mixture of profound gratitude and sheer, undiluted terror. He had saved them, but his power was so far beyond their comprehension that they couldn't see him as a man. They saw him as a force of nature, as terrifying as the storm that had just passed. A floorboard creaked near the back of the room. A figure stepped out of the kitchen. And this person was not looking at him with fear. Her gaze was sharp, analytical, and filled with a cautious, calculating light. She was a young woman, perhaps his own age, dressed in practical leather trousers and a simple tunic. A well-used sword strapped to her hip. Her crimson hair was tied back in a practical braid, and her face, though smudged with what looked like flour, was set with a fierce, regal determination. She walked past the wreckage and the unconscious pirates without a second glance, her focus entirely on him. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Naruto admitted. "Who are you?" she asked, her hand resting on the pommel of her sword. It wasn't a threat, but a habit. She was ready for anything. "Naruto Uzumaki." She nodded slowly, her green eyes sweeping over him, taking in his strange clothes, his calm demeanor, the sheer sense of presence that emanated from him. Rourke and his crew have been bleeding this island dry for almost a year. They're part of the Black Maelstrom fleet. More will come. "I figured," Naruto said. He could already sense the larger ship several leagues out at sea, a nest of negative emotions that Rourke was no doubt fleeing toward. "My name is Anya," the woman said, her voice firming. "And as the acting ruler of the Crimson Dawn Archipelago, I thank you for what you did for my people." Naruto blinked. "Ruler, you're a princess." He looked at the flower on her cheek and her practical clothes. She didn't look like any princess he'd ever imagined. A wry smile touched her lips for the first time. "My castle is currently being used to store salted fish, and my royal guard consists of my uncle and his bad knee. Titles don't mean much when pirates are at your door. Power does." Her eyes met his again, and the calculating look was back. "And you have more power than I have ever seen." That evening, the village was transformed. The oppressive fear had been lifted, replaced by a cautious, giddy sense of celebration. Music played from the tavern, and villagers shared what little food they had in a communal feast on the beach. Children, who had been hiding indoors just hours earlier, now ran laughing along the shore. Naruto sat by a bonfire with Anya, away from the main festivities. He had answered her questions as best he could, omitting the parts about other dimensions and tailed beasts, sticking to a simpler, vaguer truth. He was a trained warrior from a distant, war-torn land, and he had no idea how he got here. Anya, in turn, told him of her world. The Grand Sea was endless, a world of islands. For centuries, it had been ruled by a single pirate king, a figure of immense power who enforced a fragile peace. But the last king had vanished 500 years ago, and since then, the sea had fallen into chaos. Warlords, pirates, and corrupt navies carved out their own little empires. An island without a protector was a feast for vultures. My family's fleet was destroyed a generation ago, Anya explained, her voice low as she stared into the flames. We've been surviving, not living. RORG was just the latest leech. When his fleet returns, and they will, this village, this celebration, it will all be washed away in blood. Naruto was silent for a long moment, watching the orange flames dance against the twilight sky. It was the same old story. The cycle of hatred and violence. He dedicated his life to breaking it once. Did he have the strength to do it all again? What do you want from me, Anya? He finally asked. Anya turned to face him, her expression deadly serious. The firelight cast flickering shadows across her determined features. I saw what you did today, Naruto. You didn't just beat RORG. You humiliated him without killing him. You used overwhelming power with perfect control. You didn't do it for money or fame. You did it because he was hurting people. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intense whisper. That is not the way of a pirate. It is the way of a king. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I'm no king. You could be, she countered immediately. The title of Pirate King isn't inherited. It's taken by the one with the strength to command the seas and the will to impose order. You have the strength. I think you have the will. But power alone is not enough. It needs a banner. It needs legitimacy. He was beginning to see where this was going, and he wasn't sure he liked it. Get to the point. Anya took a deep breath. There is an ancient custom, a covenant that bound the first king's alliance together. To unite the islands, a ruler must be tied to the land. To its people, to its royal bloodline. It is a tradition that has been dormant for centuries, but it is the only path to true unity that doesn't involve conquest and slaughter. She met his gaze without flinching, her green eyes boring into his. Naruto Uzumaki, to save my people, to give your power a purpose in this world, and to take the first step toward bringing peace. Oh these seas, I am asking you to marry me. Naruto stared at her, completely and utterly dumbfounded. Of all the things he had expected, a request to be a bodyguard, a general, a hired weapon, this was the absolute last. Marriage. To a princess he'd met less than 12 hours ago. His mind reeled. He thought of Hinata, of the life he'd lost, a sharp, sudden pang of grief that was as fresh as the sea spray on his face. You can't be serious, he finally managed to say. I have never been more serious in my life, Anya replied, her voice unwavering. This is not a proposal of love, Naruto. It is a proposal of alliance. A political and military strategy. With you as my husband, you become the legitimate prince consort of the Crimson Dawn archipelago. Any attack on this island is an attack on its sovereign ruler. It gives us a flag to rally under. It gives you a foundation from which to build. It is the first piece of a new kingdom. She saw the conflict on his face, the turmoil in his eyes. I am not asking you to love me, she said, her voice softening slightly. I am asking you to protect my people. I am offering you my name, my title, and the loyalty of everyone on this island in exchange for your strength. It is a fair trade. She was right. It was a perfectly logical, strategic move. It was the kind of decision a Cage would make, a political marriage to secure an alliance and ensure the survival of their village. He respected her for it, for her willingness to put her own life and future on the line for her people. But it felt cold. A transaction. And yet, as he looked at her, at the fierce determination in her eyes, he knew it was more than that. This was her desperate, last-ditch effort to save everything she cared about. She wasn't just offering him a title. She was offering him her trust, her hope. In a chamber far away, where the pressure of the deep sea would crush a lesser structure, a being made of regal arrogance and ancient power watched the scene play out on a shimmering scrying pool of water. The walls of his throne room were woven from living coral and solidified ocean currents, lit by the eerie bioluminescence of creatures that had never seen the sun. He was the sovereign, and this world was his ocean, his divine right. He watched the flicker of the bonfire, the earnest face of the crimson-haired girl, and the strange, orange-clad anomaly who radiated a power that was utterly foreign. Astray, the sovereign mused, his voice a low rumble like the shifting of tectonic plates. A shadowy figure formed from the water at the foot of his throne, kneeling. It has a certain potency. Not of the tides, not of the land. It is an element that does not belong. The watery figure made no sound. The sovereign waved a dismissive, elegant hand. It is of no consequence. A flicker of light in an endless dark. Let the children have their bonfires and their desperate pacts. The whispering tides are stirring again, and when they rise, all lights will be extinguished. Keep an eye on the anomaly. Note its strengths. Note its weaknesses. But do not engage. It will drown itself in the coming storm, just like all the others. The watery servant dissipated back into the floor, and the sovereign turned his attention away from the scrying pool, his thoughts already on matters far older and more important than a single castaway on a backwater island. The anomaly was a distraction. The true game was about to begin. Naruto stood on the same beach where he had woken up. The moon, a perfect, unscarred silver disk, hung in the sky, its reflection a shimmering path on the dark water. The sounds of the celebration had faded to a low murmur behind him. His world was gone, his friends, his home, his dream of being Hokage, all of it, ash and memory. He was adrift, a ghost with too much power and no purpose. Anya's offer echoed in his mind. It gives your power a purpose. Wasn't that what he had always wanted? To use his strength to protect others. To create a world where no one had to live in fear. He had achieved it, for a time. He had become the hero, the Hokage. But that world was gone. Here, now, was a new world, just as broken, just as in need of a protector. He could say no. He could sail away and be a wanderer, free of all responsibility. But that wasn't him. It had never been him. He couldn't turn his back on people who needed help. He couldn't watch that village burn when he had the power to stop it. Anya's proposal wasn't a cage. It was an anchor, a place to start again. He found her standing on the cliff edge overlooking the cove, a solitary figure watching the sea. She turned as he approached, her expression unreadable in the moonlight. "I've thought about it," he said, stopping a few feet from her. She waited, her hands clasped behind her back. She did not press. She had made her offer. The decision was his. "I accept," Naruto said. The words felt heavy, monumental. "On one condition." Anya raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "This isn't just me protecting you," he stated, his gaze firm. "This is a partnership. We lead together. I won't be your weapon or your king. We do this as equals." Anya studied him for a long moment. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face, reaching her eyes for the first time. It transformed her, chasing away the hard, pragmatic leader and revealing the determined young woman beneath. "Equals," she agreed, extending a hand. A king and queen. Naruto took her hand. Her grip was firm, calloused. It was the hand of a worker, a fighter. It was not the hand of a damsel. As they shook, sealing the most important pact of their lives, a new feeling began to settle over Naruto. It wasn't the joy of a new marriage, but the familiar, crushing weight of a new responsibility. The weight of a crown he never asked for, on an island he'd only just found, in a world that was not his own. The first step on the path to becoming the Pirate King had been taken. And the sea, vast and indifferent, watched on. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Gilded Cage of the Sky Princess. The Sea Strider was a nimble vessel, a gift from Anya's people, its crimson sails emblazoned with a newly designed crest, a spiraling golden whirlpool. It was a symbol of Naruto's power and Anya's heritage, a banner for their fledgling alliance. For 3 days they had sailed across a sea of impossible blue, Anya patiently teaching Naruto the art of navigation by the stars, which were as alien to him as the salt-laced air. He learned quickly, his senses attuning to the rhythms of the wind and the pull of the tides. It was a different kind of connection to nature than the one he knew, but it was a connection nonetheless. On the 4th morning, Anya pointed to the horizon. "There," she said, her voice tight with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Eridor, the kingdom of the sky." Naruto followed her gaze. At first, he saw nothing but clouds. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he realized he was looking at a landmass floating impossibly in the air. A massive island, its underside a rugged landscape of rock and glowing crystals, hung suspended in the sky, wreathed in a perpetual, self-contained cloud system. Gleaming silver spires and delicate, crystalline bridges pierced the clouds, reflecting the morning sun in dazzling, blinding flashes. Waterfalls cascaded from its edges, turning into fine mist long before they could ever reach the sea below. How is it floating? Naruto asked, his voice filled with a genuine wonder he hadn't felt since he was a child. Sky stone, Anya explained, her hand resting on the ship's railing. The entire island is shot through with it. They say their ancestors harnessed the power of the storms to lift it from the sea millennia ago. They look down on us, Naruto. Literally. He people of Eridor consider those who live on the ocean's surface to be primitive. Great, Naruto muttered. Snobs. Anya shot him a look. Behave. This alliance is crucial. Eridor has technology we can only dream of. Wind-powered skiffs, crystal energy sources, storm lances that can strike a ship from miles away. We need them, and they are fiercely traditional. Let me do the talking. As they drew closer, a strange current lifted their ship. The water around them began to churn, not with natural waves, but with a controlled, upward surge. Naruto felt the shift in energy. It was a form of elemental manipulation, but refined. Almost mechanical. The Sea Strider was being carried into the sky on a massive column of water, a liquid elevator that ascended toward the floating island's base. They passed through the misty veil of the waterfalls and entered a cavernous, crystalline dock carved into the island's underside. Beings in sleek, silver armor that seemed to hum with latent energy guided them into a berth. They weren't human. Taller, impossibly slender, with pale skin that had a faint luminescence and long, elegant limbs. Their eyes were the color of liquid silver, and their features were sharp, beautiful, and utterly devoid of warmth. They moved with a silent, synchronized grace that was both impressive and unsettling. A figure of clear authority, his armor etched with intricate golden patterns, approached them. He didn't walk, he glided an inch above the crystalline floor. He stopped before them, his silver eyes looking down his long, straight nose at Naruto's worn attire and Anya's practical leathers. I am Warden Lyran, he announced, his voice a melodic chime that held no welcome. You are the delegation from the Crimson Dawn Archipelago. He said the name as if it were a foul taste in his mouth. I am Princess Anya, she said, stepping forward with a regal posture that Naruto hadn't seen before. And this is my husband, Prince Consort Naruto Uzumaki. We are here to request an audience with Princess Sora. Lyran's gaze lingered on Naruto for a moment, a flicker of something between disdain and morbid curiosity in his eyes. The Prince Consort, how quaint. The surface dwellers still engage in such primitive bonding rituals. He turned his back on them dismissively. Her Highness will grant you an audience. Follow, and try not to touch anything. Your sea-level contaminants are notoriously difficult to purify from the crystal conduits. Naruto felt a familiar spark of irritation. He could have flattened this arrogant wind chime with a thought, but he caught Anya's warning glance. He held his tongue, falling into step behind her as they were led through the city. Eridor was breathtaking and sterile. Crystalline walkways crisscrossed over bottomless chasms, connecting towering spires that seemed to be grown rather than built. Small, silent skiffs powered by captured winds zipped between them. The air was clean, cool, and thin, carrying the faint scent of ozone. The people they passed, all as elegant and aloof as Lyran, stopped to stare at them, their expressions of unveiled contempt. They were curiosities, savages brought into a sanctuary. They were led into a vast throne room. The throne itself was carved from a single, massive crystal that pulsed with a soft, internal light. On it sat Princess Sora. She was the embodiment of her people. Her hair was a waterfall of spun silver, her skin was the color of moonlight on snow, and her eyes, the same liquid mercury as her wardens, were glacial. She was beautiful in the way a perfectly crafted ice sculpture was beautiful, flawless, intricate, and cold to the touch. She didn't rise, she merely inclined her head a fraction of an inch as they approached. Princess Anya, you have come a long way from the mud and the salt, she said, her voice like the tinkling of shattered ice. Anya bowed her head respectfully. Your Highness, thank you for granting us an audience. Sora's gaze drifted to Naruto, and her perfectly sculpted lips thinned in distaste. And this is the brute you have tethered yourself to. The one they are calling Pirate King, in the lower world. He is louder than I expected. Naruto hadn't said a word, but he could feel her probing his energy, his very being. It was a cold, clinical assessment, like a scholar examining an insect. He met her gaze, his own blue eyes a stark, vibrant contrast to her silver. He didn't bow. I can be louder if you'd like, he said, his voice casual. A ripple of scandalized gasps went through the assembled court. Anya Sho. Him a look that could have curdled milk. Sora's eyes narrowed. For the first time, a flicker of something other than boredom appeared on her face. Annoyance. Insolence is the tongue of the simple-minded. You seek an alliance. You come to my court, seeking my aid, and you bring with you this ape who has learned a few words. This ape is the reason my island is still standing, Anya retorted, her voice sharp. He possesses a power you cannot comprehend, Your Highness. Power. Sora laughed, a sound as brittle as thin ice. The lower world mistakes brute force for power. A tsunami has force. A volcano has force. They are mindless, destructive, and utterly without grace. Here, power is control, precision, intellect. Your consort reeks of untamed energy. He is a walking catastrophe. Naruto took a step forward. You talk a lot about control, he said, his voice still even. But all I see is fear. You hide up here on your floating rock because you're scared of the world below. You see it primitive because you don't understand it. Enough, Sora snapped, rising from her throne. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You will not speak to me in such a manner. You have come here to beg for my armies and my technology. I should have you thrown from the edge of the island for your impudence. And I should let you, Anya said, stepping to Naruto's side. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension. But the threat that destroyed Roarg's fleet, a threat that will soon be at your shores, does not care for your traditions or your pride. It will pull your perfect floating island from the sky and shatter it on the waves. Sora was silent, her jaw tight. She knew of the whispers, the strange madness that was beginning to infect the minds of pirates and nobles alike. The growing power of the shadows on the sea. That was the only reason she had agreed to this audience in the first place. She sat back down, her expression a mask of cold fury. An alliance is a union of equals. You are not our equals. However, a cruel, cunning smile touched her lips. Our laws are ancient. They make allowances for uplifting the worthy. If your consort wishes to prove he is more than a beast, he will submit to the trials of worthiness. He will prove he has control, strategy, and a mind worthy of our respect. If he succeeds, I will consider your alliance. If he fails, you will both be escorted to the edge and sent on a very direct route back to the sea. Anya looked at Naruto, her eyes filled with concern. This was a trap. The trials would be designed for her people, for their unique sensibilities. Naruto just grinned. It was a sharp, confident flash of teeth that was utterly out of place in this sterile, controlled environment. Fine by me, he said. When do we start? The first trial took place in the Crystal Gardens of Harmony. It was a vast, enclosed conservatory, filled with flora unlike anything Naruto had ever seen. The plants were made of a delicate, crystalline substance that chimed softly in the recycled air. The ground was a mosaic of polished obsidian, and the air hummed with a palpable energy. Warden Lyron stood at the entrance, a smug look on his face. The crystalline chorus, he explained, gesturing to the garden. These plants are attuned to the emotional and spiritual energy of living beings. They resonate with calm and tranquility. Any uncontrolled outburst, anger, fear, even excessive joy, or any sudden surge of raw power will cause a disharmonious vibration. The results, he gestured to a corner of the garden where a pile of glittering dust lay on the floor, are immediate. You must walk the path to the central dais without shattering a single frond. Many of our own youth failed this trial for decades. Anya squeezed Naruto's arm. This is a test of control. The kind of control they've practiced since birth. He's trying to humiliate you. Naruto simply smiled at her. Don't worry, I'm the master of controlling my emotions. Anya gave him a flat, unimpressed look, clearly recalling several instances in the past few days where he'd gotten into loud, passionate arguments with a particularly stubborn seagull. He winked and stepped onto the path. The moment he entered the garden, he felt it. The hum intensified, 1,000 tiny, fragile life forces all vibrating in a delicate symphony. He closed his eyes, sinking into his sage mode. He didn't just feel his own emotions, he felt the garden itself. He could sense the flow of energy through the crystalline stems, the soft, placid thoughts of the plant-like life. Instead of suppressing his own energy, he did the opposite. He reached out with it, gently, carefully. He let his own calm, centered sage chakra harmonize with the garden's frequency. He wasn't an intruder forcing his way through. He was a guest, introducing himself to the music of the room. He began to walk. The court, watching from a viewing gallery above, held their collective breath, expecting an explosion of sound and shattered crystal. But there was only silence. Naruto moved with a slow, deliberate grace, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. With every step, the crystals around him didn't just stay intact. They seemed to respond to him. Their soft, internal light grew brighter, and the gentle chiming swelled into a beautiful, harmonious melody. He wasn't just avoiding disturbing them, he was conducting them. He reached the central dais and turned, the entire garden now glowing and singing around him. He looked up at the gallery. Lyran's jaw was slack with disbelief. Sora's cold composure had a visible crack in it, her silver eyes were wide with shock. Naruto gave them a cheerful wave. The second trial was one of strategy. Naruto was brought to a chamber dominated by a large, circular table on which a holographic projection of a complex, three-dimensional battlefield shimmered. It was a swarm of islands, floating at different altitudes, with swirling air currents and energy nodes. "This is stratagem," Sora announced, her voice having lost some of its earlier condescension. She stood opposite him, her hands clasped. "A game of our own design. It simulates aerial and arcane warfare. You will command the gold fleet. I will command the silver. The objective is to capture the opponent's citadel. You will be playing against Commander Valerius, my most brilliant strategist." A tall, handsome Eridorian with sharp features and raven black hair stepped forward and gave a curt bow. "Lord Valerius." His silver eyes held a keen intelligence, but as Naruto's sage senses swept over him, he felt something else, something dissonant beneath the surface. A bitter, festering resentment, so well hidden it was almost undetectable. He filed the information away. The game began. It was immediately obvious that Naruto was out of his depth. Valerius's moves were precise, elegant, and ruthless. He understood the game's intricate rules on a level Naruto couldn't hope to match. Within 10 minutes, Naruto's fleet was in disarray, his pieces being systematically eliminated. The court murmured amongst themselves. The savage was a fool, after all. Anya watched, her knuckles white. She had seen Naruto in a fight. He was a force of nature. But this was a different kind of battle, and he was losing. Naruto stared at the board, his brow furrowed. He was trying to play their game by their rules. And that was why he was failing. He wasn't a general who moved pieces on a map. He was a shinobi. He thought about Jiraiya, about Kakashi, about the importance of deception, misdirection, and thinking outside the box. He looked at Valerius, whose face was a mask of cool concentration. And then Naruto grinned. "Hey, teach," he said to the attendant monitoring the game. "Can my pieces do anything?" The attendant, startled, replied, "Within the parameters of their designated class, yes." "Why? Okay," Naruto said, and made his move. He took a single, small scout skiff. A piece Valerius had ignored as irrelevant, and moved it not toward the battle, but directly into one of the swirling air currents on the board. A move that, according to the rules, was suicidal. The piece would be thrown randomly across the map. Valerius scoffed. "A desperate, meaningless move by a drowning man. Maybe," Naruto said cheerfully. "Let's see where it lands." The attendant initiated the random current effect. The scout piece vanished and reappeared on the far side of the board, deep in Valerius's undefended territory. It was a 1 in a thousand chance. "And now," Naruto said, his eyes glinting, "I'm going to do that with all of them." He began systematically sacrificing his own pieces to the random air currents. It was chaos. It was madness. It went against every strategic principle of the game. Valerius's perfect, elegant formations were useless against an enemy that was literally appearing out of nowhere all over the board. His defenses were stretched thin, his plans in ruins. And then Naruto used his shadow clone jutsu. "Hey," he said, turning to Sora. "The rules say I'm playing against him. It doesn't say how many of me there have to be." Before anyone could react, the room was filled with 100 identical Narutos, all grinning. They swarmed the strategy table, each one analyzing a different section of the board, shouting out coordinates and potential attack vectors. The single, brilliant mind of Valerius was suddenly pitted against a hundred-minded hive of unpredictable chaos. Valerius was overwhelmed. The sheer volume of information, the utter insanity of Naruto's non-strategy. It broke his concentration. He made a mistake. A small one, but it was enough. Naruto, the original Naruto, saw it. A lone, sacrificed pawn had landed, by pure chance, right next to Valerius's citadel. Checkmate, Naruto said, moving the piece. Silence. The court stared, stunned. He hadn't won through superior strategy. He had won by breaking the very concept of strategy. He had thrown so much chaos at a system built on order that the system had simply collapsed. Sora stared at the board, then at Naruto, a new, grudging respect dawning in her eyes. He was a brute, but he was a clever brute. Naruto, meanwhile, was focused on Valerius. As the game ended, he felt a powerful, venomous wave of hatred and fury surge from the commander, so potent it was like a physical blow. The Lord's mask of composure had slipped for just a second, revealing a twisted, ugly snarl of pure malice before it was hidden again. It was far more intense than simple frustration at losing a game. This was something darker. The Whispering Tides, Naruto realized. They were here. The final trial was a formal address to the Eridorian court in the Grand Conclave. It wasn't a test of power or strategy, but of diplomacy and charisma. It was Sora's last attempt to salvage the situation, to prove that even if he had passed the first two trials, he was still an uncivilized lout unfit for their alliance. Naruto stood on the central podium, facing hundreds of silent, judging Eridorians. Sora sat on her throne, flanked by Lord Valerius, whose composure had been perfectly restored. Before Naruto could speak, Valerius stepped forward. "Your Highness," he began, his voice ringing with false sincerity, "must we continue this farce? This creature from the depths has made a mockery of our traditions. He wins not through skill but through chaotic luck and vulgar tricks. An alliance with such a being would be an insult to our ancestors. It would dilute our purity, infect our culture with his barbarism. I speak for the court when I say that he is not worthy." A murmur of agreement ran through the conclave. They saw Valerius as their champion, defending their way of life. "He offers us nothing but violence and chaos," Valerius continued, his voice rising with passion. "He will drag us down into the muck with him. I implore you, Your Highness, send them away. Preserve the sanctity of Eridor. He was good. He was very good. He was twisting Naruto's successes into failures, painting his unconventional thinking as a flaw, not a strength." Anya, standing to the side, looked worried. This was a political assassination. And Valerius was wielding the knife. Naruto watched him, but he wasn't listening to the words. He was focused on the feeling. The dark, coiling energy that was pouring off Valerius. Invisible to everyone else, the Whispering Tides were feeding his ambition, amplifying his resentment of Sora, twisting his patriotism into xenophobic hatred. Naruto held up a hand, and a respectful silence fell over the room. They were at least willing to hear him out. "He's right," Naruto said simply. The court, and Valerius himself, looked stunned. "I am chaotic," Naruto continued, his voice calm and clear. "I don't play by your rules, because your rules are designed for a world that doesn't exist anymore. You sit up here in your perfect, clean city and you pretend the world below isn't real. But a storm is coming. One that your walls can't stop and your strategies can't predict." He then turned his gaze directly on Valerius. "You talk about purity, about protecting your people, but is that really what you want?" And then he did something no one expected. He closed his eyes, drew on his sage mode, and reached out. Not with his fist, not with a Rasengan, but with his sensory abilities. He gathered the dark, malevolent energy pouring off Valerius, the jealousy, the hatred, the corrupted ambition, and he pulled it to the surface. He didn't create anything, he simply revealed what was already there. He manifested it. A swirling, ugly, purple-black aura erupted around Lord Valerius. It was a physical manifestation of his inner corruption, a cloud of visible malice that clung to him like a shroud. The Eridorians, with their innate sensitivity to energy and emotion, gasped. They couldn't just see it, they could feel it. The sheer, concentrated venom of Valerius's soul washed over them. A sickening wave of bitterness and hate. Valerius looked down at himself, his eyes widening in horror as he saw his own inner darkness made visible. "What is this sorcery?" he shrieked, but his words were hollow. The court could feel the truth of it. "That," Naruto said, his voice ringing with power, "is the true threat to Eridor. Not me. It's a poison that grows inside you. It whispers to you, tells you that your jealousy is justice, that your ambition is your birthright. It's already here, in your court, in your most trusted commander." Sora stared at Valerius, her face pale with shock and dawning horror. She saw the years of quiet resentment, the subtle challenges to her authority, all cast in a new, terrifying light. She had been blind. Guards, their faces grim, moved in and seized the sputtering Valerius, who was now screaming incoherently about power and his right to rule. The dark aura slowly faded as he was dragged away, but the sickening feeling remained in the air. The conclave was silent, the Eridorians looking at Naruto with new eyes. They were filled not with contempt, but with a mixture of fear and profound respect. He had shown them truth about themselves they had refused to see, and he had done it without raising a single weapon. Sora slowly rose from her throne and descended the steps, stopping directly in front of Naruto. The cold mask was gone, replaced by a complex expression of humility and resolve. "You have passed the trials," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You have shown us a different kind of strength, a different kind of wisdom." She looked from him to Anya. "The threat you spoke of is real. Eridor cannot face it alone." She took a deep breath, the words tasting strange in her mouth. "The alliance is accepted, and, as per the ancient covenants that bind such an accord," she looked Naruto directly in the eye, a faint, almost imperceptible blush on her pale cheeks. "I will honor my side of the bargain. I, Princess Sora of the Sky Kingdom Eridor, accept your proposal of marriage." Naruto just stood there, a king, a prince consort, and now, a fiancé to a second princess in as many weeks. He was building his kingdom, just as Anya had said. But with every new alliance, every new crown, he could feel the weight on his shoulders growing heavier. And for the first time, he had a clear picture of his enemy, not a person, but a creeping, corrupting shadow that attacked the hearts of men. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Siren's Lament in the Sunken City. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless canopy, and the sea was a gentle, rolling swell of deep indigo. Aboard the Sea Strider, a fragile peace had settled. It was the peace of three powerful personalities learning to occupy the same space without drawing blood. Anya, in her element, commanded the ship with an easy confidence, her crimson braid catching the wind as she shouted orders to the small, loyal crew. Sora, on the other hand, was most certainly not in her element. She stood rigidly near the mast, her flawless silver robes a stark contrast to the weathered wood of the deck. Her people did not sail on the unstable liquid surface, they glided above it. Every lurch and sway of the ship was a personal affront to her dignity. She was currently engaged in a silent, glacial war of wills with a bucket that had been placed near her in case of seasickness. So far, her pride was winning. Trailing behind them like a sleek, silver swan was the Eris, an Eridorian scout skiff. It hovered a few feet above the waves, propelled by silent gusts of wind captured in its crystalline sails, a testament to the alliance Sora had brought with her. Naruto was perched comfortably on the forecastle railing, a position that made Anya nervous and Sora visibly cringe. He was trying to teach a flock of seagulls the basics of a simple hand seal. They were not proving to be apt pupils. "See, it's easy," he said, holding up his hands in the ram seal. "Just cross your little bird fingers. Or wing bones, whatever." One of the gulls squawked indignantly and tried to steal the piece of dried fish he had tucked into his belt. "He finds your lack of grace familiar," Sora commented dryly, not taking her eyes off the horizon. "Hey, I have plenty of grace," Naruto retorted, shooing the bird away. "I just don't see the point in standing still like a statue when the whole world is moving." "The world is not moving," Sora corrected him. "The ship is pitching on an unstable medium. It is a problem of inefficient transport. It's called sailing," Anya called out from the helm, a grin on her face. "Try to enjoy it, Your Highness. The fresh air is good for the complexion." Sora's lips thinned. Before she could formulate a suitably icy retort, a piercing sound cut through the air. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a mournful, melodic wail that seemed to vibrate in the bones, a sound of profound, soul-deep sorrow. It was coming from a cluster of low-lying islands barely visible on the horizon. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, the playful mood gone. His sage senses reached out, and he felt a cold spot. A void of life in a sea that was teeming with it. The area around the islands felt shrouded in despair. What was that? Anya asked, her hand shielding her eyes as she peered toward the source of the sound. Sora's personal discomfort was forgotten, replaced by a sharp, analytical focus. A sonic frequency, but organic in origin. Highly unusual. We're going to check it out, Naruto said. It wasn't a suggestion. Our destination is the Obsidian Archipelago, Sora stated. A detour is illogical. People might be in trouble, Naruto countered. That's all the logic I need. He looked at Anya, who simply nodded and adjusted their course. Logic could wait. As they approached the Serpentine Isles, the beauty of the place became a chilling contradiction. The water shifted from indigo to a stunning turquoise, and the islands were a paradise of white sand and lush green atolls. But the silence was deafening. There were no birds, no fish breaking the surface. The mournful wail had faded, replaced by an oppressive quiet that felt heavier than any sound. The water itself seemed murky, sick. They anchored in a placid lagoon, the bottom of which was littered with the splintered remains of fishing boats. A village, built from vibrant, living coral, stood on the shore. Its structures curving and spiraling in shapes that were both alien and beautiful. But it was half deserted. Many of the coral homes were dark and empty. A group of figures emerged from the water to meet them. They were the Aquan, a race of fish men with shimmering, scaled skin in shades of blue and green, webbed hands and feet, and large, dark eyes. They carried spears tipped with sharpened obsidian, and they moved with a wary, defensive grace. Their leader, an old Aquan with a beard of pale, trailing tentacles, held up a hand. "Turn back, surface dwellers," he said, his voice a gurgling whisper. "This is a place of sorrow. The siren's lament has sounded. There is only death here now." "We heard the sound," Anya said, stepping forward, her hand held open in a gesture of peace. "We came to help." The old Aquan shook his head. "No one can help. The Leviathan is awake. It has gone mad. It has claimed the sea as its own. We are trapped here, starving." Naruto hopped off the ship onto the sand, his boots sinking slightly. He felt the collective despair of the villagers, a cold, wet blanket of hopelessness. "Leviathan." Before the elder could answer, a softer voice spoke. "He means the guardian of the deeps." A young woman emerged from the largest of the coral structures. She was Aquan, but her features were finer, her scales a pearlescent, marrying white that seemed to catch the light. She moved with an ethereal grace, her long, thinned hair drifting around her as if she were still underwater. This was Princess Marina. Her large, dark eyes were filled with a sadness so profound it seemed ancient. "I am Marina," she said, giving a slight bow of her head. "Welcome to our dying home." They were led into the central chamber of the Coral Palace. The air was cool and damp. Marina explained the situation, her voice never rising above a melancholic whisper. The Leviathan had protected her people for centuries, a colossal, gentle beast. She kept the more dangerous sea monsters at bay. But a month ago, it had changed. It had become a mindless engine of destruction, attacking their ships, their nets, their homes. The mournful sound they had heard was a call it made before it attacked, a sound her people called the siren's lament. "We cannot fight it," she said, her hands clasped before her. "It is too powerful, and it is sacred." The first queen of the Aquan made a pact with the first guardian. "Our bloodlines are intertwined. Its life is tied to ours." "Then you have to sever that tie," Sora said, her voice clinical. "If a component of a system becomes destructive, it must be removed." Marina looked at her with those impossibly sad eyes. "It is not a component, Sky Princess. It is the last of its kind. A living piece of our history, our soul." She then turned her gaze to Naruto. "According to the ancient rites, when the guardian loses its way, it is the duty of the reigning monarch to guide it back to peace. To quell its rage. How do you do that?" Naruto asked, sensing the size of a whale. Marina closed her eyes. By returning the gift of life my ancestor received, I must offer myself to the Leviathan. My sacrifice will appease its spirit and bring it peace. It is my destiny." The room fell silent. Anya stared at her, aghast at the strategic waste. Sora looked at her as if she were a fascinating, if illogical, specimen. Naruto just felt a surge of pure, hot anger. It was the kind of thinking he hated most. The idea that peace required sacrifice, that someone had to die to fix a problem. It was the logic of a world he was trying to leave behind. "No," he said. The word was flat, absolute. Marina opened her eyes, startled. "I beg your pardon. I said no," Naruto repeated, stepping closer. "That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. You're their leader. You're a princess. Your job is to live for your people, not throw your life away on some old story." "It is not a story. It is our most sacred tradition," the old elder protested. "Then your tradition is dumb," Naruto shot back, his voice finally rising. "There's always another way. Giving up is never the answer." Before the argument could escalate, the entire island shuddered. A deep, resonant roar echoed from the sea, a sound of pure, agonized rage. From outside came screams of terror. The siren's lament had ended. The attack had begun. They rushed outside. A colossal head, larger than the sea strider, had risen from the lagoon. It was a creature of immense size and terrifying power, its body a long, serpentine coil of muscle and armored plates. Its skin was a sickly, bruised purple, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light. But as Naruto stared at it, his sage mode active, he saw more than just a monster. He saw pain. He saw confusion. And coiling deep within its chest, like a venomous parasite, he felt a familiar, dark energy. The Whispering Tides had found a new host. The Leviathan opened its mouth, a maw lined with teeth like obsidian daggers. And a torrent of pressurized water shot out, aimed directly at the Coral Palace. Naruto didn't hesitate. He formed a cross seal with his fingers. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen Narutos appeared on the beach. Half of them formed a chain, each one summoning a Rasengan. Sage Art. Massive Rasengan Super Barrage. They met the water blast head-on. The collision was explosive. Steam erupted in a massive cloud, blanketing the lagoon. The remaining clones zipped across the water, running on its surface. One of them, the real one, formed a truth-seeking orb into a long black staff and vaulted himself into the air, directly toward the monster's head. The Leviathan swatted at him with a fin the size of a house. Naruto spun, using the staff to deflect the blow, the impact sending a shockwave across the water. He landed on the beast's snout, his feet sinking slightly into its tough hide. He placed his palm flat against its skin. He wasn't attacking. He was sensing. He pushed his own calm, natural energy into the beast, a gentle probe. "What happened to you?" He was met with a psychic scream of pure agony and rage. The red in the creature's eyes flared, and the dark energy within it pulsed violently. "Pain. Intruder. King. False king." The voice wasn't the beast's. It was deeper, colder, and filled with an ancient, regal arrogance. The sovereign. He was using the Leviathan as a puppet. A remote-controlled weapon. The beast thrashed, trying to throw Naruto off. Naruto leapt back, landing on the water's surface as the Leviathan submerged, its massive tail whipping around and smashing the village's main pier into splinters before it vanished into the murky depths. Naruto stood on the water, breathing heavily. The attack was over as quickly as it had begun. The beast was gone, but the threat remained. "Incredible," Anya breathed, staring at the spot where the monster had been. "Its energy readings are chaotic," Sora reported from the deck of the Eris, where she had been monitoring the event with a crystalline device. "There's a massive, stable power source, but it's being corrupted by a parasitic, volatile energy signature at its core. They are in conflict." "The Whispering Tides," Naruto said, walking back to shore. He turned to Marina, who was staring at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. "See, it can be fought. Now you're going to help me save it." His conviction was absolute. Marina, who had spent her life believing her only purpose was to die, was now faced with a man who refused to even consider that possibility. The plan was audacious. Sora, analyzing the energy data, confirmed she could modify the Eris's crystal power core to emit a targeted, purifying pulse. It would need to be perfectly calibrated to the parasite's frequency, she explained. Her fingers flying across a holographic interface. It would disrupt the parasitic energy without harming the host. But the beam's cohesion degrades rapidly in dense liquid. It will have to be delivered at point-blank range. I'll do it, Naruto said immediately. We need a diversion, Anya added, already in her commander role. She turned to the Aquan warriors. Your princess's life is on the line. I need every spear you have to draw the beast's attention to the surface. And someone needs to guide him, Marina said, her voice finding a new strength. The currents leading to the sunken city, its lair, are a treacherous maze. Only I can navigate them. Absolutely not, Naruto said. It's too dangerous. It is my guardian, Marina insisted, meeting his gaze. Her eyes, for the first time, held something other than sadness. They held resolve. You have shown me that my duty is to live for my people. But my responsibility to the guardian remains. I will not send you to your death alone. I will see this through. There was no arguing with her. The dive was a descent into another world. Naruto, creating a bubble of air around their heads, followed Marina through the deep, dark ocean. The pressure was immense, the light of the surface a distant memory. Bioluminescent creatures drifted past them like silent, glittering stars in the abyss. Marina moved with an effortless grace, her body at home in the crushing dark. You speak of saving everyone, she said, her voice soft in the confines of their air bubble. Have you never lost anyone? The question hit him like a physical blow. He thought of Jiraiya, his parents, Neji, Obito, a parade of ghosts. Too many, he answered, his voice thick. That's why I don't want to lose anyone else. Not if I can help it. They reached the entrance to the sunken city. It was a magnificent, haunting sight. Colossal, cyclopean structures, covered in coral and sea life, loomed in the dark, a testament to the Aquan's ancient past. At the city's heart, in a vast, open plaza, the Leviathan was coiled, sleeping. The sickly red glow from its eyes was gone, but the dark energy still pulsed from its chest. As they drew closer, it stirred. Its eyes snapped open, glowing with that malevolent red once more. But this time, the voice that echoed in Naruto's mind was not just a scream of rage. It was a clear, cold, articulate thought, dripping with contempt. I grow weary of your interference, anomaly. The sovereign was speaking directly through his puppet. The water around them grew colder. Smaller, shark-like monsters the same glowing red eyes emerged from the ruined buildings, swarming toward them. Now, Naruto yelled into the communication crystal Sora had given him. On the surface, Anya gave the order. The Aquan warriors, in their submersible crafts, began their assault, hurling explosive-tipped spears at the beast's back as it rose from the depths. Aboard the Eris, Sora rerouted all power to the main cannon. Target is locked. Firing window is 60 seconds. Underwater, Naruto engaged the swarming monsters. He was a vortex of motion, truth-seeking orbs forming shields and blades, clones appearing with Rasengans to clear a path. Marina darted through the chaos, her knowledge of the city's layout allowing her to guide him through collapsing archways and treacherous corridors, always moving closer to the Leviathan's core. The beast was a god of destruction, its rage fueled by the sovereign. It ignored the Aquan spears, focusing its fury on the single orange speck in its sanctum. It unleashed another water blast, this one so powerful it shattered one of the ancient towers. Naruto met it with a tailed beast bomb Rasenshuriken, the resulting explosion boiling the very sea around them. You cannot purify what is already mine. The sovereign taunted. This world's despair is my nourishment. This beast's pain is my wine. I'm about to put you on a diet. Naruto yelled back, dodging a swipe from a massive claw. He saw his opening. The beast, in its rage, had exposed its chest for a split second. Sora, now, firing, came the reply. A brilliant beam of pure, white energy lanced down from the surface, cutting through the dark water. It was a spear of starlight in the crushing black. Naruto gathered all the nature energy he could, his own sage chakra flaring. He created a Rasengan in his palm. But he poured his will into it, not the desire to destroy, but the desire to heal, to save. He leapt forward, catching the energy beam from Sora's cannon in his other hand, wrestling with its immense power. And then slammed both attacks together. The Sage Art Rasengan merged with the Eridorian energy pulse. The result was a swirling sphere of incandescent gold and white, a miniature sun of pure, cleansing power. He thrust it forward, directly into the pulsing, dark mass in the Leviathan's chest. There was no sound, only light, a blinding, silent explosion of pure energy that vaporized He swarming monsters and lit up the entire sunken city like it was high noon. The Sovereign let out a psychic scream of frustration and pain as his connection was violently severed. The Leviathan convulsed. The dark, parasitic energy was burned away, leaving only the creature's own life force. The malevolent red in its eyes faded, replaced by a deep, ancient, intelligent blue. It looked at Marina, and for a moment, there was a flash of recognition, of gratitude. Then, exhausted, its purpose fulfilled and its pain gone, it turned and swam slowly into the abyssal depths, vanishing into the darkness. The curse was broken. When they surfaced, the Aquan were cheering, their voices echoing across the now calm lagoon. Marina, her face wet with sea water and tears of joy, looked at Naruto with an expression of such profound gratitude and awe that it made him feel strangely shy. That evening, as the Aquan celebrated with a fervor that shook their coral village, Marina approached him. Anya and Sora stood nearby, a silent, united front. "You have saved us," Marina said, her voice clear and strong, the melancholy gone forever. "You have taught me that a leader's strength is not in their willingness to die, but in their resolve to live. My life, and the allegiance of my people, is yours." She bowed her head. "The ancient pacts must be honored, not with death, but with life. To bind my people to your cause. To create a bond that will never be broken. Naruto Uzumaki, I ask you to take me as your wife." Naruto looked at Anya, who gave a pragmatic nod. He looked at Sora, who offered a barely perceptible, almost smile of approval. He looked at Marina, her pearlescent scales shimmering in the torchlight, her eyes filled with a new, vibrant hope. 3 princesses, 3 kingdoms, 3 promises. Later that night, Naruto stood on the deck of the Sea Strider, watching the 3 moons of this strange world rise over the horizon. He could feel the weight of their crowns, their hopes, their lives, all settling onto his shoulders. It was heavy, so damn heavy, but as he heard the light footsteps of Anya, Sora, and Marina approaching behind him, he realized, for the first time, that he just have enough shoulders to carry it. The Sovereign had tested him and lost. The game was indeed changing. And Naruto Uzumaki was starting to build a family as powerful and strange as the new world he found himself in. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Desert Rose and the Shifting Sands of Treachery. The transition from the endless, soothing blue of the ocean to the stark, searing ochre of the Great Zafara Desert was a physical shock. The very air changed. The gentle, salt-laced breeze was replaced by a dry, superheated wind that tasted of dust and ancient stone. The sea, which had been their entire world, became a shimmering blue line in the distance, a memory of a different life. They had left their ships in the bustling port city of Osra, a chaotic, vibrant nexus of trade where ships from 100 islands docked. From there, they traveled inland on the back of large, 6-legged reptilian creatures called sand skimmers, the only beings capable of navigating the treacherous, shifting dunes. "This is the domain of Princess Zara," Anya explained, her voice tight as she adjusted the linen scarf covering her face. "The Caliphate of Shurima. They control the flow of nearly all precious metals and rare minerals in the Grand Sea. They are fabulously wealthy and notoriously neutral. Getting an alliance here will be harder than pulling teeth from a sea king. They have achieved neutrality through overwhelming economic and military superiority," Sora added from her own mount, her silver robes now covered by a practical desert cloak. She was examining a crystalline device that measured the ambient temperature and solar radiation. Their capital, Kai-Shur, is said to be an impregnable fortress built around the only freshwater oasis for 1,000 leagues. Logically, they have no need for us. Everyone has needs, Marina said softly, her scales losing some of their luster in the dry heat. She seemed the most affected by the climate, and Naruto had discreetly used his chakra to create a thin, cooling veil of moisture around her. "They just might not know what they are yet." Naruto said nothing, his sage mode a silent, watchful presence. He felt the life of the desert. It wasn't empty. It was teeming with hidden things, creatures that burrowed beneath the sand, hardy plants with roots that delved deep into the earth. It was a land of survivors, of things that endured. He respected that. He could also feel the city, still miles away. A massive concentration of life, a buzzing hive of energy that was dwarfed by something else, a single, powerful signature at its center. It burned like a contained star, arrogant and fiercely bright. Kai Shur rose from the dunes not like a city, but like a geological formation. Its walls were carved from the living sandstone of a massive mesa. Golden and gleaming in the relentless sun. Banners of crimson and gold fluttered from towers that seemed to scratch the sky. It was a declaration of power and permanence in a world of shifting sand. Their arrival was expected. Guards in ornate golden armor, their faces hidden behind intimidating masks shaped like falcon heads, escorted them through the city. It was a marvel of engineering. Deep channels, filled with cool, clear water, ran alongside the sandstone streets, feeding lush, sunken gardens that were a riot of green in the heart of the desert. The people were sharp-eyed and shrewd, merchants and artisans whose gazes sized them up with the practiced air of traders assessing valuable goods. The palace was a fortress within the fortress, its throne room a vast, open-air chamber shaded by crimson silk awnings. The air was cool, scented with exotic spices and the clean smell of water from the ornate fountains that bubbled in every corner. And on a throne of polished obsidian and gold sat Princess Zara. She was not what Naruto had expected. She was a slip of a woman, seemingly delicate, her face framed by a cascade of jet black hair bound with golden rings. Her skin was the color of rich bronze, and her eyes were the startling, piercing gold of a desert falcon. She was draped in silks of deep crimson, but she wore them like armor. There was nothing soft about her. Her gaze was sharp, intelligent, and utterly uncompromising. She radiated an aura of absolute authority that had nothing to do with inherited titles and everything to do with personal will. Standing beside her throne, his arms crossed over his powerfully built chest, was the burning star Naruto had sensed from the desert. He was tall, with sun-bleached blonde hair and a rugged, handsome-faced hat was already becoming legend in the taverns and ports of the Grand Sea. He wore light, practical armor of hardened leather and bronze, and a massive, curved blade was strapped to his back. This was Kale, the Desert Hawk, Princess Anya of the Crimson Dawn. Zara's voice was like smooth, cool silk, but with an edge of steel. Princess Sora of Eridor, Princess Marina of the Aquan. She acknowledged each of them with a slow, deliberate nod, her golden eyes missing nothing. And the man who collects princesses, Naruto Uzumaki. Her gaze settled on him, and it was like being weighed and measured on a master's scale. I hear you are building a kingdom, Zara continued, a hint of amusement in her tone. A noble, if foolish, ambition. The sea does not like to be tamed. It's not about taming it, Naruto said, stepping forward. It's about giving people a chance to sail it without having to fear pirates or warlords. A sharp, barking laugh came from Kale. He pushed himself off the throne, his presence dominating the room. A child's dream, he said, his voice a confident baritone. Peace is not given, it is taken. It is forged in the fires of conquest and maintained by the sword of a single, absolute ruler. He walked toward Naruto, circling him like a predator. I have heard the stories. A man with the power of a demon, who fights for the weak. A noble sentiment. But the weak will always be weak. Coddling them only prolongs the inevitable. True unity comes when the strong rule, and the weak learn their place. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, locked with Naruto's. That is my dream. The ideological gulf between them was vast and immediate. It was the clash of two opposing forces, two different answers to the same question. I know your dream, Kale, Zara said, her voice cutting through the tension. You have been my betrothed for 2 years. You seek my armies, my wealth, to fuel your conquest. She then turned her gaze back to Naruto. And you seek the same, but for a different purpose. You both come to me asking for the keys to the world. But Shirima has remained strong by never choosing a side. This time, you have to, Kale stated. A storm is coming. The whispering tides. They call it a madness spreading across the sea. Neutrality will be a death sentence. He's right, Naruto agreed. But his answer is to become a bigger storm. My answer is to build a lighthouse. Zara's lips curved into a slow, cunning smile. She looked from one man to the other. Two powerful suitors. Two competing philosophies. My kingdom stands at the crossroads. An interesting dilemma. She leaned forward, her golden eyes glinting. But our traditions are clear. When two seek the hand of the ruling monarch, their claim is not settled with words, but with blood and sand. You will fight, in the grand arena, at dawn. The winner will have my hand, and the allegiance of Shurima. The loser will have nothing. It was a challenge, a test, a piece of political theater on a grand scale. Kale grinned, a flash of predatory teeth. It will be my pleasure to dismantle your fairy tale, piece by piece. He looked at Naruto, issuing a silent challenge. Naruto simply nodded. Fine, but let's be clear, I'm not fighting for her hand. I'm fighting for her people. Zara's smile widened. He had passed a test she hadn't even consciously set. That night, in their lavishly appointed quarters. The mood was tense. It's a trap, Anya said, pacing the floor. She's pitting you against each other. Kale is the greatest warrior in the southern seas, and he's fighting in his home element. The desert sand. His control over granular silicates is said to be absolute, Sora confirmed, studying a projection from her data crystal. He can create constructs, blind his opponents, even generate localized abrasive vortexes. From a tactical standpoint, your visibility and mobility will be severely compromised. I can feel his spirit, Marina added, her voice filled with concern. It is strong, and proud. But there is a frantic hunger to it. A desperation for power that frightens me. Naruto listened to all of them. They were his counsel, his strength. I know, he said finally. I can feel it too. The whispering tides have their hooks in him. They're feeding his ambition, telling him that conquest is the only way, that he's the only one strong enough. Then you cannot hold back, Anya said, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. You must overwhelm him. End it quickly. No, Naruto said, and all three women looked at him. If I just crush him, I prove his point. That might makes right, and I'll turn him into a bitter enemy, one the tides will have no trouble completely corrupting. I have to beat him, but I have to save him, too. It was a far more difficult goal than simple victory. Dawn broke over Kai Shur, painting the sandstone walls in hues of rose and gold. The grand arena was a massive bowl carved out of the mesa, its floor a sea of deep, golden sand. Thousands of spectators filled the stands, their voices a low, expectant hum. Zara sat in the royal box, her face an unreadable mask, flanked by her guards. Kale stood in the center of the arena, looking completely at home. He was bare-chested, his body a map of scars and defined muscle. He held no weapon. The sand is my blade and my shield, he called out as Naruto entered from the opposite gate. Here, I am a god. What are you, castaway? Naruto didn't answer. He just stood there, calm and centered, letting the warmth of the rising sun soak into his skin. The gong sounded, its deep boom echoing across the arena. The fight began instantly. Kale didn't move. He simply raised a hand, and the entire arena floor came to life. The sand swirled, rising like a wave to crash down on Naruto. Naruto leapt, easily clearing the sandy tsunami, but in midair, a dozen sharp, obsidian-hard spikes of sand shot up to impale him. He twisted, using his truth-seeking orbs as a platform to bounce off. Landing lightly 100 feet away. Impressive reflexes, Kale complimented, a smirk on his face. He clapped his hands together, and two perfect, solid sand clones of himself rose from the arena floor. They were not illusions. They were living statues, and they charged Naruto with fists like sledgehammers. Naruto met them head-on. He didn't need clones of his own. He moved between the two sand constructs. A blur of orange and black. He shattered one with a Rasengan that blasted it back into a cloud of loose sand, and dismantled the other with a series of precise, chakra-infused strikes that caused it to crumble. You're fast, Kale acknowledged, his smirk fading slightly. But you're standing on my army. He slammed his palms onto the ground. The sand erupted. Hands, hundreds of them, made of hardened sand, shot up, grabbing at Naruto's ankles, trying to pull him down, to bury him. Naruto flared his chakra, a golden aura exploding outwards, blasting the hands away. Quote, you think you're the only one who can make friends? He yelled. Shadow clone jutsu. In a series of smoke-filled pops, 200 Narutos filled the arena. The crowd gasped. "An army for your army," the original Naruto said with a grin. The battle that followed was chaos on a grand scale. Naruto's clones swarmed Kale, who responded by creating a swirling vortex of razor-sharp sand around himself. A defensive shield that shredded any clone that got too close. Other clones were bogged down, fighting shifting dunes, sand monsters, and Kale's own regenerating constructs. It was a spectacular display, but it was a stalemate. Naruto knew he couldn't win a battle of attrition. Kale was drawing on the entire desert. "Enough games," Kale roared. He flew into the air, lifted by a pillar of sand, his eyes glowing with a faint dark light. The ambition, the hunger Marina had sensed, was coming to the surface. "Let me show you true power." Grand Desert Coffin. He spread his arms, and a huge section of the arena sand rose up, forming a massive, hollow dome over Naruto. It began to contract, a gigantic, crushing fist meant to grind him into paste. "Naruto!" Anya screamed from the stands. Inside the rapidly shrinking dome of sand, Naruto was calm. He closed his eyes. "You use the sand," he thought. "But I am connected to the entire world." He entered Six Paths Sage mode fully. The golden aura intensified, and the 9 truth-seeking orbs appeared behind him, black as night. He pushed his hands against the contracting walls, but he wasn't pushing with muscle. He was pushing with nature energy itself. The sand, a part of the natural world, hesitated. It resisted Kale's command, responding to the overwhelming life energy of the sage. The dome stopped contracting. Then, cracks of golden light appeared all over its surface. With a final, explosive pulse of chakra, the entire sand dome was vaporized, not into sand, but into superheated, shimmering glass. The arena was showered in a rain of glittering, glass dust. Naruto hovered in the center of the crater, his golden cloak of chakra billowing, his eyes glowing with power. Kale stared, his jaw hanging open. "Impossible. You turned my sand to glass." "Your sand is just a part of the world," Naruto said, his voice echoing with the power of the sage. "And I'm friends with the whole world." Kale's shock turned to rage. The dark influence flared in his eyes. "Then I will bury you under the entire desert." He began to draw on a massive amount of power, the very foundations of the arena beginning to shake. But Naruto was already moving. He appeared directly in front of Kale. Faster than the eye could see. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't form a Rasengan. He simply placed his hand on Kale's chest. "I see you," Naruto said softly. "I see your ambition, your desire to protect people. But I also see the fear behind it. The fear that you're not strong enough. And I see the darkness that's whispering to you, telling you to take more, to be more. To crush anyone who stands in your way." He pushed a gentle, purifying wave of his own chakra into Kale. It wasn't an attack, it was an offering, a moment of clarity. Kale stumbled back, clutching his chest. The dark glow in his eyes receding. He saw a flash of a future he was running toward. A throne of skulls, an ocean of blood, his own face twisted into a mask of tyranny. It terrified him. The whispering tides shrieked in his mind and then fell silent, their hooks dislodged by the sheer, unadulterated positive energy of Naruto's chakra. He fell to his knees, panting, the arrogance and rage replaced by a profound confusion. He had been so sure, so certain his path was the right one. Naruto stood over him. "You're strong, Kale, really strong. But you can be stronger with allies than you ever could be as a tyrant." He held out a hand. "Your way leads to a world of fear. My way, well, it's a lot more work. But it's worth it. Join me." The entire arena was silent. They had just witnessed not a defeat, but a conversion. In the royal box, Zara stood up. She had seen everything. The power, the chaos, the clash of wills. But it was that final act, the offer of a hand of a killing blow, that had sealed her decision. Kale's path was a blaze of glory, but it would inevitably burn out, taking her kingdom with it. Naruto's path was a slow, steady fire, one you could build a civilization around. "The victor has been decided," her voice rang out, clear and absolute. "The claim is honored." She descended to the arena floor, her crimson silks trailing in the glass-dusted sand. She walked past the kneeling, conflicted Kale, and stopped in front of Naruto. "You have won," Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her golden eyes appraising him with a new level of respect. You fight not just to defeat your enemies, but to understand them. That is a rare and valuable quality in a king. She gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh. The allegiance of Shirima is yours. My armies, my wealth, and my counsel are at your disposal. And, as per the ancient tradition, she looked him straight in the eye, her expression one of pragmatic acceptance. So is my hand in marriage. Kale looked up, his face a mixture of humiliation and dawning realization. He looked at Naruto's outstretched hand, then at Zara, who now stood by Naruto's side. He had lost everything, or, perhaps, he had been given a chance to gain something more. With a grunt, he took Naruto's hand and allowed himself to be pulled to his feet. Naruto now had 4 fiancés, a powerful desert kingdom, and a new, dangerously competent rival who was now, reluctantly, his ally. The balance of power in the Grand Sea had just shifted dramatically. And the weight on his shoulders, the weight of all these crowns and all these lives, grew heavier still. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Forge of the Firelands and the Broken Vow. The Firelands archipelago was a wound on the skin of the world, a chain of volcanic islands perpetually shrouded in a haze of smoke and steam. The sea around them boiled in places, and the air tasted of sulfur and hot metal. It was an intimidating, primordial landscape, but it was also alive with a fierce, defiant energy. This was the home of the world's greatest blacksmiths, a people who lived in the shadow of volcanoes and hammered their wills into steel. Their flagship, now escorted by an Eridorian skiff and a swift Shuriman sand ship capable of skimming the waves, anchored in the main harbor of the capital, Kurigane. The city was built not of wood or stone, but of black, volcanic rock and reinforced steel. Its architecture stark, functional, and immensely strong. The heat from the ever-present lava flows was harnessed in a complex network of channels that ran beneath the streets, powering the forges that were the heart and soul of their civilization. The constant, rhythmic clang of 1,000 hammers striking 1,000 anvils was the city's heartbeat. A delegation met them at the docks. They were a stout, broad-shouldered people, their skin tanned and weathered, their arms corded with the muscle of their trade. They moved with a no-nonsense purpose, their gazes direct and appraising. Their leader was a young man with a severe topknot of black hair and a perpetual scowl etched onto his handsome face. His arms, bare below a leather smithing apron, were covered in intricate, spiraling tattoos that seemed to move in the firelight from the nearby forges. I am Kenji, son of the Forge Lord, brother to the princess, he announced, his voice a low growl. He gave the assembled princesses a perfunctory nod, but his eyes, sharp and black as obsidian chips, settled on Naruto with undisguised skepticism. You are the one they call Pirate King. He said the title like an insult. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto replied, meeting his hostile gaze without flinching. We've come to speak with your princess. My sister, Hina, is occupied with the rites of the mountain, Kenji grunted. She will see you when she is ready. He turned, clearly expecting them to follow. Come, do not dawdle. The heat of the forges waits for no man. As they were led through the city, Kale, who had been silent for most of the voyage, leaned closer to Naruto. These are my kind of people, he murmured, a note of admiration in his voice. They value strength and action, not words and politics. They also seem to value glaring. Anya noted under her breath, watching the faces of the smiths who paused their work to stare at their procession. They were shown to a guest hall carved from a single, massive chamber of obsidian. It was Spartan, furnished with steel and stone, but it was immaculately clean. Kenji left them there with a curt, "Wait. Charming fellow," Zara remarked, running a finger over a perfectly balanced dagger left on an ironwood table. The craftsmanship is exquisite. Their reputation is well earned. His emotional state is highly agitated, Sora observed, a small frown on her perfect face. There is a significant undercurrent of resentment directed at you, Naruto. My analysis suggests a 92% probability that he views you as a threat to his position or his family's honor. You needed a machine to tell you that? Naruto asked, grinning. I got that from the first scowl. An hour later, they were summoned to the caldera of the main volcano, Mount Akuma. The heat was immense, a physical presence that shimmered in the air. On a platform of cooled magma overlooking a lake of fire stood the princess. Princess Hina was nothing like her brother. Where he was fire and anger, she was stone and stillness. Her long, black hair was bound in an intricate, ceremonial braid, and she wore robes of deep crimson and black, the colors of cooling lava. Her face was serene, almost impassive, but her eyes held a deep, ancient weariness, the burden of a leader in a harsh land. She held a large, ceremonial hammer in her hands, its head made of polished, star-strewn meteorite. She gave a formal bow. Naruto Uzumaki, it is an honor. I am Hina. Her voice was low and steady, like the deep rumble of the volcano beneath their feet. You have come seeking an alliance. My brother believes you are a conqueror hiding behind a noble cause. My scouts say you are a protector. I will form my own judgment. Fair enough, Naruto said. Hina looked him over, her gaze lingering on the calm, easy way he stood in the crushing heat that made even Kale sweat. Our laws are forged in fire, as is our steel. They are old, and they are unbending. For generations, the ruler of the Firelands has been bound by the volcano's vow. I can only offer my hand, and thus our kingdom's allegiance, to a man who can prove he has the strength and spirit to endure the heart of Mount Akuma. She pointed with her hammer to a small, dark opening in the caldera wall, from which a terrifying, incandescent orange light pulsed. That tunnel leads to the hearthstone, the very core of the volcano. A suitor must walk the path, touch the stone, and return. It is a trial of will, of endurance. It is the measure of a man in the eyes of our ancestors and our mountain. Kenji stepped forward, a smug, challenging smirk on his face. No man has completed the trial in over 100 years. The last who tried was reduced to ash before he took 10 steps. Do you have the metal for it, Pirate King? Naruto looked at the tunnel. He could feel the raw, untamed nature energy pouring out of it. The heat was unbelievable, enough to melt steel in seconds. To anyone else, it was a suicide mission. To him, it was a warm bath. His 6 paths sage mode made him immune to the effects. The natural energy that would incinerate a normal man would only nourish him. This is illogical, Sora whispered, her device beeping frantically. The radiation levels are lethal. The temperature exceeds the melting point of most known alloys. No organic being can survive. Naruto just smiled. Don't worry, he said to his companions. I've handled worse. He walked toward the tunnel, ignoring Kenji's goading stare. This was their custom. He would honor it. He took a single step into the overwhelming heat and vanished into the blinding light. The court waited. Kenji's smirk was wide and confident. He expected to hear a scream, and then silence. The minutes ticked by. 1, 2. The assembled smiths began to murmur amongst themselves. The trial never took this long. It was usually over in seconds. 5 minutes later, Naruto walked back out of the tunnel. He wasn't burned. He wasn't even sweating. He looked, if anything, slightly refreshed, as if he'd just spent a few minutes in a pleasant sauna. He held up his hand. In his palm rested a small, glowing ember stone, a piece of the volcano's living heart. The hearthstone, I presume? He asked politely. A collective, disbelieving gasp went through the crowd. Kenji's face went from smug, to shocked, to a deep, mottled shade of furious red. Hina's stoic composure finally broke, her eyes widening in pure astonishment. Naruto had expected cheers. He had expected respect. He had fulfilled their sacred vow, passed their impossible test. Instead, a low, angry murmur began to spread through the assembled smiths. They weren't looking at him with awe. They were looking at him with contempt. Kenji was the one who gave voice to their anger. Sacrilege, he roared, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at Naruto. This is a mockery. Naruto blinked, completely confused. A mockery. I did what you asked. You cheated. Kenji spat, his voice filled with venom. The trial is about endurance. About will. It is about a man facing the fire and proving his spirit is stronger than the flame. It is not a casual stroll for some demon who feels no heat. You have not honored our tradition, you have spat on it. You have made it meaningless. The crowd roared in agreement. He's right, it's a trick. He has no respect. Naruto finally understood. His very power had invalidated the test. By passing it so easily, he had stripped it of its meaning, its honor. He hadn't proven his strength. He'd proven that their ultimate measure of a man was nothing to him. He hadn't just failed to win their respect, he had actively earned their hatred. Hina stepped forward, her face a mask of conflict. "The vow has been fulfilled," she said, her voice strained. "The law was the law. The letter of the tradition has been met. But not the spirit," Kenji yelled, his eyes wild. Naruto could feel it now, the dark, subtle poison of the whispering tides latching onto Kenji's wounded pride. His righteous fury. The whispers were telling him that his anger was justified, that this outsider was a cancer that needed to be cut out. "I will not allow my sister, my kingdom, to be given to a man who holds our most sacred right in contempt. I challenge him." "There is no provision for a second challenge," Hina said, her voice firm. "Then I make one," Kenji declared, his rage making him bold. He stalked towards Naruto, his eyes blazing. "You have the power of a god, outsider. But do you have the heart of a man? The skill of a craftsman? The soul of a builder? I challenge you to a trial of the forge. We will each be given the same materials, the same fire. We will forge a blade. Let the steel be our judge. Let the quality of our work decide who is worthy." The crowd roared its approval. This was a challenge they understood. A test of skill, not demonic tricks. Naruto looked at Hina. She was trapped, her face pale. She was bound by the vow, but her people were on the verge of rebellion. He looked at Kenji, at the dark energy now coiling around him, invisible to all but himself. This wasn't just about pride anymore. The tides were pushing Kenji towards a conflict that could tear his own country apart. This was a fight he couldn't win with a Rasengan. "I accept," Naruto said. The great forge of Kurigane was the cathedral of their people. It was a massive cavern deep within the mountain, the heat from the volcano itself channeled into a dozen master forges. The air rang with the sound of steel, and the walls were lined with the legendary weapons their ancestors had created. Naruto and Kenji stood before two identical forges. Piles of raw, high-grade iron ore and other, more exotic alloys were placed beside them. Kenji stripped off his apron, his tattooed muscles gleaming in the firelight. He was in his element, a master craftsman preparing for his magnum opus. Naruto just stared at the pile of rocks. He knew how to mold chakra, how to create elemental attacks that could shatter mountains. He had no idea how to make a sword. His fiancés and Kale watched from a protected gallery. "This is a disaster," Anya stated bluntly. "He's going to be humiliated." The probability of him creating a functional, let alone masterwork, blade with no prior experience is 0.001%, Sora calculated, her voice flat. "Perhaps he can use a clone to read every book on smithing in their library," Zara suggested, though she didn't sound hopeful. Kale just watched, his expression conflicted. He understood Kenji's rage. He respected this trial of skill. Part of him wanted to see the seemingly invincible Naruto fail. But another, newer part of him felt a grudging loyalty. Kenji began to work. He moved with a powerful, innate grace, his hammer a blur of motion. He selected his materials with a master's eye, his body and mind in perfect harmony. Every strike was precise, every quench and fold a verse in an ancient poem of creation. Naruto looked at his own hammer. It felt heavy and awkward in his hand. He could try to use a clone to learn, but it would be a cheap imitation. It wouldn't have the soul, the spirit, that these people valued. It would be another form of cheating. He would lose, and he would deserve to lose. He closed his eyes, shutting out the noise of the forge, the jeers of the crowd, and Kenji's confident hammering. He thought about what Kenji had said. The soul of a builder. He thought about his own power. It wasn't just for destruction. Sage mode was about connecting with the life of the world. His chakra could give life, could heal. He looked at the forge. The fire within it was powerful, but sullen. He reached out with his senses and felt the heart of the mountain. It was old, and parts of it were growing cold, its lifeblood. The raw energy that fueled the great forge, slowly coagulating. This was a problem these people didn't even know they had yet. An idea sparked in his mind. A crazy, impossible idea. He wasn't going to play Kenji's game. He was going to change the rules. He ignored the ore. He ignored the hammer. He walked to the great forge itself, the central heart of the entire cavern, on which all the other forges drew their heat. He placed his hands on the black, hardened stone of its frame. The crowd jeered, thinking he was giving up. "What is he doing?" Hina whispered, Her hands clenched. Naruto poured his sage chakra into the forge. Not a trickle, a flood, a tidal wave of pure, golden life energy. He wasn't trying to control the fire. He was trying to talk to it, to wake up the mountain's slumbering heart. The great forge, which had burned with a steady orange glow for 1,000 years, began to change. The flames turned from orange to a brilliant, blinding white gold. A deep, resonant hum filled the entire cavern, a sound of immense, awakening power. The channels that fed the other forges began to glow with a new intensity. The very air grew thick with pure, raw creation energy. Kenji faltered, his hammer stroke going wide. He stared at the great forge, his eyes wide with disbelief. The fire in his own forge was now burning hotter, purer, than he had ever seen. The impurities in the steel he was working were being burned away in an instant. Naruto pulled his hands back. He then plunged them directly into the pile of raw ore. He didn't use the fire. He used his own chakra. With his perfect control, he separated the iron, the carbon, the tungsten, molecule by molecule. He then reached into himself and summoned a truth-seeking orb. He didn't form it into a weapon. He broke it down, weaving its fundamental, reality-warping substance into the alloy he was creating in his hands. He wasn't forging a sword. He was creating a new, living metal. A perfect fused ion of the world's finest materials and the divine energy of the sage. The crowd fell silent, their jeers dying in their throats. They were witnessing a miracle. This wasn't smithing. This was creation. Finally, Naruto opened his hands. Floating above his palms was a single, perfect sphere of metal. It was a deep, liquid silver, and it seemed to drink the light, a soft, golden radiance pulsing from its core. Kenji had just finished his own blade. It was a masterpiece, a katana of folded steel with a temper line like a raging storm, a weapon worthy of a king. But when he looked from his sword to the pulsating sphere in Naruto's hand, he felt his heart sink. He had created the pinnacle of his craft. Naruto had created a star. Naruto walked over to the great anvil, a massive block of obsidian that was said to be unbreakable. He gently placed the sphere upon it. "You wanted to see the soul of a builder," Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying through the now silent hall. "My power isn't just for fighting. It's for protecting, for mending what's broken." He placed a hand on the sphere. He wasn't striking it, he was willing it. The sphere flowed like liquid, reshaping itself. Not into a weapon of war. It formed a perfect, small, silver hammer, an exact replica of the one Hina carried. And it formed a shield, its surface reflecting the golden light of the revitalized forge. He then looked at the great anvil. He sensed a flaw in it, a hairline fracture deep within its core, a wound from 1,000 years of legendary strikes. He placed his hand over it, and his golden chakra flowed into the stone, healing the ancient crack, making the anvil stronger and more whole than it had ever been. He had built, he had mended, he had restored. He turned to Kenji. The young man was staring, his face a canvas of shattered pride, awe, and dawning understanding. The dark, angry energy of the tides around him dissipated, burned away by the pure, life-giving energy that now filled the room. All that was left was the man. Humbled and ashamed, Kenji looked at his own magnificent sword. Then he walked to the anvil, laid the blade upon it, and bowed his head deeply to Naruto. "I was wrong," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was blinded by pride. Your spirit is stronger than any fire." Hina walked down from the gallery, her face no longer stoic. There were tears in her eyes. Shish. He looked at the small hammer and the shield, the symbols of creation and protection. He hadn't just fulfilled the spirit of the challenge, he had embodied the very soul of her people. "The alliance is forged," she declared, her voice ringing with a new, powerful conviction. Not in a vow of fire, but in a demonstration of true strength. The strength to build, not break. She looked at Naruto, a deep, unwavering respect in her eyes. "My life, and the future of my people, are yours to protect." 5 princesses, 5 kingdoms. Naruto looked at the tools he had made, not weapons. He had won not by overwhelming his opponent, but by healing the heart of their home. It was a different kind of victory, a different kind of power. And as the weight of this new crown settled, it felt less like a burden, and more like a tool he was finally learning how to use. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Summit of Kings and the Sovereign's Gambit. The Crimson Dawn archipelago had been transformed. The small, sleek, fishing village that had been Naruto's entry point into this world was now the bustling, temporary heart of a burgeoning empire. In the protected waters of the main cove, a fleet unlike any the Grand Sea had ever witnessed was assembled. Gleaming, silent Eridorian skiffs hovered near the surface, their crystalline sails drinking the sun. Golden, high-prowed barges from Shurima, opulent and imposing, were moored beside the brutish, powerful ironclad vessels of the Firelands, which still vented faint wisps of steam. And just beneath the waves, the graceful, organic shapes of Aquan submersibles could be seen, patrolling the perimeter. It was a visual testament to the impossible alliances Naruto had forged. The summit was held on the central island, in a large, open-air pavilion construct. For the occasion from island hardwood and Shuriman crimson silk. It was a neutral ground, built by the hands of all 5 kingdoms. At the center sat a huge, round table, a deliberate choice by Naruto. No head, no hierarchy. He sat between Anya, who looked every bit the proud host, and Sora, who was using a small crystalline device to discreetly scan the assembled delegates for atmospheric contaminants. Zara, flanked by Kale, exuded a calm, watchful authority, her golden eyes taking in every subtle shift in posture and tone. Marina sat quietly, a serene presence that seemed to soothe the nervous energy in the pavilion. While Hina and her brother Kenji represented the stoic, unshakable strength of their people. They were not just princesses anymore, they were a council of queens, and Naruto was the strange, unpredictable sun around which they all now orbited. "Thank you all for coming," Naruto began, his voice carrying easily through the pavilion. He wasn't one for formal speeches. He spoke plainly, directly. "We've all fought our own battles to get here. We've faced pirates, monsters, and our own traditions." He glanced at Kenji, who gave a curt, respectful nod. "But we've done it by working together. Now, we need to make that permanent." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "I'm not here to declare myself emperor. I don't want to rule you. I want to build a world where you can rule yourselves. In peace. I propose we form a Grand Council. A place where every island nation, large or small, has a voice. We combine our strengths, Eridor's technology, Shurima's resources, the Firelands' industry, the Aquan's knowledge of the seas, and the Crimson Dawn's, well, we've got a lot of spirit." He grinned at Anya, who rolled her eyes good-naturedly. A shrewd-looking Shuriman vizier, one of Zara's advisors, cleared his throat. "A noble sentiment, Prince Consort. But what you propose is an unprecedented level of economic and military integration. Shurima's Newt, Ralita has been the bedrock of its prosperity. Tying our fate to so many others is a significant risk." "The greater risk is standing alone," Kale countered, his voice a low rumble. He had become a surprisingly staunch, if gruff, advocate for the alliance since his defeat. "A spider can be crushed. A web of spiders is a different matter entirely. There are threats coming that your gold cannot buy off." His logic, while crudely articulated, is sound, Sora stated, deactivating her scanner. "Isolated systems are prone to catastrophic failure when faced with an unexpected external variable. Our simulations indicate that a cooperative union increases the survival probability of all member states by a factor of 67% when faced with a world-ending threat." The debate continued, a complex dance of politics and personalities. But beneath the arguments about trade routes and shared defense protocols, a consensus was forming. The world was changing. The old ways were not enough. What Naruto proposed was radical, dangerous, and utterly necessary. It was Naruto's sage mode that felt it first. A sudden, jarring wrongness. A discordant note in the symphony of the world's life energy. He fell silent mid-sentence, his head tilting as he focused, his expression turning grim. "Naruto, what is it?" Anya asked, noticing the immediate shift in his demeanor. "The sea," he said, his voice a low whisper. "Something's wrong with the sea." He stood and walked to the edge of the pavilion, which overlooked the cove. The others followed, their debate forgotten. The day was perfect. The sun was bright, the wind was gentle. But the water was behaving unnaturally. The tide was receding, but far too quickly. It wasn't a normal ebb and flow. The sea was being pulled back from the shore as if by a vast Invisible hand, exposing reefs and sea floor that hadn't seen the sun in centuries. The ships in the harbor began to list, their keels grinding on the suddenly shallow bottom. A primal fear, a deep, instinctual terror that all island dwellers possess, fell over the crowd. It's impossible, Marina breathed, her eyes wide with horror. No storm, no current could do this. Naruto's senses were stretched out for miles across the ocean. He felt it then, a colossal, malevolent gathering of energy. It was raw, elemental power, but it was being controlled, shaped with a hateful intelligence. This wasn't nature. This was an attack. On the horizon, a thin, white line appeared. It seemed insignificant at first, a mere ripple. But it was growing, rising, swelling with impossible speed. A tsunami. A fireland's captain roared, the mother of all waves. But it was more than that. It was a moving mountain range of water, a liquid wall that blotted out the horizon, its crest so high it seemed to scrape the sky. It was being driven forward by a will of pure malice, a weapon aimed at the heart of their new alliance. The sovereign, Naruto gritted out, his hands clenching into fists. This was not a test. This was an execution. Panic erupted. The delegates, the guards, the villagers, they all stared at the approaching apocalypse, frozen in terror. Anya, Naruto's voice, cut through the fear like a thunderclap, sharp and commanding. Evacuate the village. Get everyone to the high ground on the central mesa. Now, Anya snapped out of her shock, her commander's instincts taking over. You heard him. Move, everyone to the mesa. She began yelling, her voice rallying the stunned guards. Sora, Naruto yelled, can you create a barrier? Anything to slow it down. So, Ra was already barking orders into her communicator. All skiffs, maximum power to kinetic projectors. Form a unified deflection field. It won't stop it, but it might break its momentum. Zara, Kale, he turned to them. We need walls. Can you raise the sea floor? Not from here. Kale yelled back over the rising wind. The rock is too deep. But we can reinforce the island. Zara, on it, she confirmed, her advisors already issuing commands. The Shuriman forces, masters of earth and stone, began to move, their goal not to stop the wave, but to ensure the island itself didn't shatter under the impact. Hina, Kenji, your ships are the toughest. Form a breakwater at the mouth of the cove. Angle them to deflect, not block. Buy us time. Kenji, his face grim, gave a single, sharp nod and began bellowing orders to his captains. His voice carrying over the roar of the receding ocean. Marina, Naruto's gaze met hers. Your people, get them out of the water. But I need you to guide the currents. Do anything you can underwater to disrupt the wave's base. Marina nodded, her expression resolute, and dove into the remaining water, a shimmer of pearlescent scales vanishing into the chaos. With his orders given, with his allies moving as a single, cohesive unit, Naruto turned to face the wave. It was a god of destruction, a moving continent of water that would scour the island clean. He entered Six Paths Sage mode, a brilliant golden aura erupting around him. 9 truth-seeking orbs materialized, and he flew into the air, a golden comet streaking towards the coming doom. He was not just a king. He was a shield. Shadow clone jutsu. 1,000 Narutos appeared in the sky, a golden army against a sea-born god. We're not going to stop it. He yelled to his clones, his voice a singular thought shared among them all. We're going to tear a hole in it. Give them a chance. He flew ahead, the original Naruto, forming a Rasenshuriken in his hands. But this was the largest he had ever made. He poured all the nature energy he could draw into it, the 9-tailed beasts within him adding their chakra. The result was a spinning vortex of wind and chakra the size of a small mountain, its shriek tearing the air apart. Below, the alliance moved with desperate speed. The Eridorian skiffs formed a line, a shimmering blue barrier of kinetic energy flickering to life between them. The Fireland's ironclads, belching black smoke, positioned themselves in a chevron formation, their armored prows pointed at the enemy. On the island, Kale and the Shirimans were a whirlwind of activity. The very ground groaning as they raised massive earthen walls and ramparts, transforming the gentle slopes of the island into a fortified bastion. The wave hit. Naruto threw his tailed beast bomb Rasenshuriken. It struck the center of the colossal wall of water, and the resulting explosion was an event of geologic scale. A blinding flash, and a sound that was felt more than heard. A massive, gaping hole was torn through the tsunami, vaporizing billions of gallons of water in an instant. For a glorious second, it looked like it might be enough. But the wave was too big. The water, driven by the sovereign's implacable will, simply collapsed in on the hole, reforming, weakened but still monstrously huge. It crashed against Sora's kinetic barrier. The shimmering shield held for 3 seconds. The Eridorian skiffs groaning under the strain, their crystal cores glowing cherry red. Then, with a sound like shattering glass on a continental scale, the barrier exploded, sending skiffs tumbling through the air. But it had done its job. The wave's crest, its most destructive point, had been blunted. Next, it hit the firelands, breakwater. The ironclad ships, masterpieces of engineering, were tossed about like toys. Steel plates screamed and buckled, masts snapped, but they held their formation, their immense weight and strength turning the solid wall of water into a churning, chaotic maelstrom, redirecting vast torrents of water away from the cove's center. Then, the wave struck the island itself. It was no longer a clean wall, but a broken, furious flood. It slammed against the ear. Then walls Kale and Zara's people had raised. The fortifications held, channeling the water, breaking its force, turning a single, cataclysmic impact into 1,000 smaller, more manageable floods. Naruto and his clones were everywhere. They formed a human chain, their combined chakra creating a massive golden shield that took the brunt of the water that broke over the barriers. Clones plucked falling sailors from the air, pulled villagers from the path of flash floods, and pushed crumbling walls back into place. The water surged into the village, sweeping away the pavilion, the docks, the lower buildings. But the core of the island, the high ground where Anya had led the people, remained safe. The Alliance's combined efforts had not brought them a clean victory. It had been a messy, brutal, desperate struggle. But they had survived. They had held the line. As the last of the floodwaters began to recede, leaving a landscape of devastation in their wake, an unnatural calm fell. The sky, which had been clear, turned a dark, bruised purple. The sea churned, and a voice echoed from the heavens and the depths simultaneously. It was a voice of ancient power and infinite arrogance, the voice Naruto had heard in the sunken city. A commendable effort. For insects, the sovereign's voice boomed, dripping with condescending amusement. You build your little sandcastles of hope, and you think yourselves masters of your own fate. A face began to form in the churning clouds above, a vaguely humanoid visage of immense scale, its eyes swirling vortexes of water and dark energy. I am the sovereign of this world. The sea is my blood, and the tides are my breath. For eons, I have maintained the natural order. The strong devour the weak. The ambitious drown in their own pride. It is a perfect, self-sustaining system. The face in the clouds turned its gaze upon Naruto, who hovered in the air, his golden aura flickering with exhaustion. But you are an anomaly. A disease. You protect the weak, you forgive the ambitious. You seek to impose your own, unnatural order on my world. You gather the broken pieces and try to glue them together, creating a fragile monstrosity that offends the very nature of this sea. The voice dropped, becoming a cold, lethal promise. This was a warning, a demonstration. Your alliance is a blasphemy. Disband it. Return to your petty squabbles. Let the natural order resume. If you refuse, I will not send another wave. I will drag your every island, one by one, into the crushing depths. I will erase you from memory. The sea is patient, anomaly. But my patience has its limits. The face in the clouds dissipated, the sky returned to its normal color, and the sea grew calm once more. The sovereign was gone. Silence descended upon the ravaged island. The survivors, delegates, soldiers, and villagers, stood amidst the wreckage of their homes and ships, staring at the sky, their faces pale with a new kind of terror. They had fought and bled to survive a force of nature. But they had just learned that nature had a master, and it hated them. Naruto landed softly on the mesa, his sage mode receding, leaving him looking tired but resolute. His fiancés rushed to his side. Anya grabbed his arm, her face smudged with dirt, her eyes fierce. Sora was scanning the residual energy in the air, her expression grim. Zara's calm had been replaced by a cold fury, while Marina and Hina looked out at the sea with a mixture of fear and defiance. So, Kale said, walking up to the group, his voice rough. We have a name for our enemy. And he's just declared war on the entire world. Naruto looked at the faces of his allies. He saw the shock, the fear. But he also saw a new, hard-edged resolve. The political debate was over. The summit had been crashed, their homes had been wrecked, and their very existence had been threatened by a being who considered himself a god. He wants us to be afraid, Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying to everyone on the mesa. He wants us to scatter back to our islands and live in fear. He thinks he can break us. He looked out at the ruined cove, at the broken ships and flooded homes. This was his fault. His PR. Essence here had brought this doom upon them. The weight of it was crushing. But then he looked at the people. They were already beginning to work, pulling friends from the wreckage, tending to the wounded. Their spirits battered but not broken. He's wrong, Naruto finished, a fire igniting in his eyes. He didn't break us. He just brought us all together. He just gave our Grand Council its first official order of business. Anya looked at him, her expression grim but proud. And what's that? Naruto's gaze turned back to the now serene horizon, a promise of violence in his eyes. We kill his god. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Ashen Queen and the Echoes of the Past. The aftermath of the Sovereign's attack was a landscape of organized chaos. The sun shone down on a scene of communal effort, a testament to the Alliance's newfound solidarity. Shuriman Earth Shapers worked alongside Fireland's engineers, clearing debris and reinforcing the island's damaged foundations. Eridorian technicians salvaged what they could from their downed skiffs, their advanced tools a strange sight next to the simple wood and rope cranes of the islanders. Anya was a whirlwind of motion, directing relief efforts, her voice hoarse but unwavering. In the temporary command center, one of the few buildings on the mesa left standing, the mood was grim. A holographic map, projected from one of Sora's devices, showed the archipelago and the vast, empty ocean surrounding it. His power is absolute, Kale stated, his arms crossed as he stared at the map. He was a man of action, and this enemy offered no clear target to strike. He doesn't have a fortress. He doesn't have an army in the traditional sense. He is the army. He is the fortress. How do you fight the ocean itself? You don't, Zara said, her voice a low, thoughtful murmur. You don't fight a river by punching the water. You find its source and you divert it. Her analogy is sound, Sora agreed, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The energy signature we detected during the assault was immense, but it had a focal point, a point of origin miles out at sea. However, it was also diffuse, integrated with the ocean's own natural energy patterns. Targeting it with conventional weaponry would be like trying to remove a single drop of poison from a swirling vat. Naruto was quiet, his eyes closed. He was extending his senses, trying to find the Sovereign's malevolent presence again, but it was gone. It had dissolved back into the sea, leaving no trace. It was like trying to find a single fish in the entire world. He's hiding, Naruto said, opening his eyes. He expended a lot of energy to create that wave. He's recovering, watching. Then we must find a way to strike at him while he is dormant, Hina said, her ND resting on the hilt of a sheathed blade at her side. We need a weapon that can wound a god. Or knowledge that can unmake one, Zara added. Her eyes met Sora's. Our archives in Shurima speak of the first drowning. The era when the Sovereign rose to power, 5 centuries ago. The texts are fragmented, censored by time and fear, but they all mention one place, the Isle of Whispers. Sora's fingers moved faster. A section of the map, deep in the uncharted northern void, began to glow. The Isle of Whispers, she confirmed. My people's records refer to it as Anomaly 73. It is the center of a perpetual, self-sustaining cyclonic weather pattern. All expeditions have been lost. It is considered a navigational black hole. The legends say it was his throne, Zara continued, her voice dropping. The last bastion of a people who fought him. A people who possessed a power that could challenge his own. They failed, and he cursed the island, turning their defeat into an eternal storm, a monument to his victory. So we're sailing into a cursed, permanent hurricane to find a ghost story? Anya asked, joining the group, her face smudged with dirt. It's the only lead we have, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the glowing spot on the map. If anyone knew his weakness, it was the people who fought him last. We have to go. The journey to the northern void was a trial in itself. The new, integrated fleet sailed together. The sleek Eridorian ships scouting ahead, the powerful Firelands vessels forming the core, and the Shuriman barges carrying supplies. The sea grew colder, the sky a perpetual, featureless gray. They entered the storm's outer bands, and the world became a screaming vortex of wind and water. Waves the size of hills crashed over their decks. It was a relentless, grinding assault, designed to wear down ships and souls. But the fleet held. Haina's ironclads proved their worth, their low-slung, heavy bodies plowing through the waves. Sora's skiffs used their Kineti sea projectors to create small pockets of relative calm, acting as shields for the other ships. It was a brutal, exhausting voyage, but they pushed through the Sovereign's lingering wrath. After 3 days, they broke through the storm wall and entered the eye. The wind died to an eerie calm, and a gray, sickly light filtered through the swirling clouds above. Before them lay the Isle of Whispers. It was a nightmare of gray. The island was covered in a fine, pale ash that fell like a constant, silent snow, blanketing everything. The trees were skeletal, petrified things, their branches twisted into shapes of agony. Jagged, black rock formations jutted from the ashen landscape like broken bones. A crumbling, ancient city, its architecture alien and sorrowful, clung to the slopes of a dormant volcano. The entire island radiated a feeling of profound, suffocating grief, so potent that it was a physical weight. Naruto staggered the moment they set foot on the shore, one hand going to his temple. His sage mode, which usually connected him to the vibrant life of the world, was now a conduit for 500 years of undiluted despair, rage, and fear. It was a psychic scream that threatened to overwhelm him. Naruto, Marina cried, rushing to his side. He waved her off, forcing himself to build a mental wall, to filter the overwhelming emotions. I'm okay, he gritted out. This place is haunted. They moved through the silent, ashen streets, their footsteps muffled. They were not alone. Pale, silent figures watched them from the shadows of the crumbling buildings. The descendants. They were wraith-like, with skin the color of ash and large, haunted eyes. They wore clothes of gray, woven cloth, and moved with a ghostly silence. They were led to the heart of the city, to a decrepit throne room in the shadow of the volcano. On a throne of cracked obsidian sat the Ashen Queen. Age had withered her to a fragile-looking thing of skin and bone, but her eyes burned with a fierce, intelligent light. Her long, white hair was caked with the same gray ash that covered everything. More fools, she rasped, her voice like the grinding of stones. Every few decades, a new hero washes up on my shores. Filled with fire and hope. They come seeking the secret to killing a god. I watch them march into the citadel of echoes, and I watch the echoes tear their hope to shreds. She looked them over, her gaze lingering on each of the princesses before settling on Naruto. Why should you be any different? Because we're not one hero, Anya said, her hand resting on her sword. We are an alliance of 5 kingdoms. And we have him. The queen let out a dry, rattling laugh. You have a boy who shines brightly. I have seen stars before. The darkness always swallows them. We need your help, Naruto said, pushing past the psychic assault of the island's grief. We know your people fought the sovereign. We believe you know how to defeat him. Defeat him. The queen's eyes narrowed. He cannot be defeated. He is eternal. Our ancestors learned that lesson in blood and fire. All we have left is this curse. This monument to our failure. She pointed a trembling, skeletal finger towards the volcano's peak. The knowledge you seek is in the citadel, at the caldera's heart. But it is guarded by the echoes of the Queen's royal guard, the greatest warriors of our age. Their spirits were captured in the moment of their defeat, twisted by the sovereign's curse and the whispers of the tides. They are a storm of rage and regret, and they will destroy any living thing that approaches. Leave my island. Go home and wait for the sea to claim you. It is a kinder fate. No, Naruto said, his voice firm. We're not leaving. The Ashen Queen simply sighed and sank back into her throne, a flicker of something that might have been pity in her ancient eyes. Then go, and add your screams to the whispers on the wind. The path up the volcano was treacherous. The ash gave way to razor-sharp obsidian rock. As they climbed higher, the oppressive feeling of grief intensified, and a new sound joined the wind, the faint, ghostly clang of steel on steel, the distant cries of a battle that had ended centuries ago. The citadel was an open-air fortress built into the volcano's caldera. And there they were, the echoes. Dozens of them. They were translucent, ghostly figures in ornate, archaic armor. They moved with an unnatural speed, their faces locked in expressions of eternal rage. They were fighting a battle against an invisible enemy, their phantom blades clashing, their silent war cries filled with unending despair. The moment Naruto and his companions stepped into the caldera, every single echo stopped. Every ghostly head turned, and every pair of hate-filled eyes fixed on them. They saw not rescuers, but new enemies, fresh meat for their unending war. With a collective, psychic roar of fury, they charged. The fight was immediate and brutal. Kale and Anya met the first wave, their mortal blades passing harmlessly through the spirits' forms. The ghosts, however, could interact with them. A spectral blade phased through Kale's block and left a shallow, ice-cold gash on his arm. Sora's skiff, hovering above, fired blasts of kinetic energy, which seemed to disrupt the echoes, making them flicker and recoil, but they quickly reformed. Hina and Kenji fought back to back, their heavy blades useless. Relying on sheer grit to weather the storm of attacks. Naruto realized this was a battle they could not win. Physical force was useless. Even his Rasengan passed through them, only momentarily dispersing their forms. These were not bodies to be broken, they were spirits trapped in a loop of rage. An echo, the spirit of what must have been their captain, lunged at Naruto. It was faster, stronger than the others. Naruto dodged, but the ghost's gauntlet grazed his cheek. It felt like liquid nitrogen, and for a second, Naruto's vision was filled with the ghosts. Last moments. The overwhelming sight of the sovereign, a being of pure water and power, laughing as he crushed the life from the captain's body. He felt the captain's despair, his failure, his soul-crushing regret. The whispering tides had fed on that regret for 500 years, turning these heroes into monsters. You can't fight rage with more rage, Naruto thought, stumbling back. He looked at his friends. Being overwhelmed by an enemy they couldn't touch. He had to do something different. He closed his eyes, ignoring the phantom blades phasing past his head. He dropped his defenses. He let the island's pain, the echoes, fury, wash over him. But instead of being consumed by it, he reached through it. He used his sage mode not as a weapon, but as an antenna. He searched for something beneath the rage. A flicker of the men they used to be. The memory of the sun. The love for their queen. The pride in their duty. He found it. A tiny, flickering ember buried under an ocean of darkness. He flared his chakra, but it wasn't the golden cloak of battle. It was a gentle, warm, all-encompassing light. It was the energy of life itself. He wasn't projecting force. He was projecting peace. I see you, he said. His voice calm and clear, amplified by his chakra so it cut through the din of battle. I see your fight. I see your sacrifice. The echoes faltered. Their charge slowed. You didn't fail, Naruto continued. His warm light expanding, pushing back the oppressive gray of the island. You stood against a god. You fought to protect your people. You held the line. He took a step forward, directly into the group of confused spirits. The ghostly captain raised its blade to strike him. Naruto didn't flinch. He reached out and placed his hand on the spirit's chest. He didn't try to destroy it. He shared a memory. He shared the feeling of the sun on his face from the day before, the taste of fresh water, the sound of Anya's laughter. He shared the feeling of hope. The captain's spectral form shuddered violently. Its face, contorted in a mask of rage, began to soften. The hate in its eyes was replaced by a deep, profound sorrow, and then, a flicker of understanding. The rage had been a shield against the pain of its failure. Naruto wasn't attacking the shield, he was healing the wound beneath it. One by one, the other echoes stopped fighting. They turned towards Naruto, drawn to the impossible warmth that was suffusing their cold, gray world. He was a sun rising in their eternal midnight. Your watch is over, Naruto said softly, his voice filled with an empathy that transcended words. You can rest now. He poured more of his energy outwards, not just his own, but the pure, natural energy of the world. He was purifying the land, cleansing the psychic stain of Sovereign's curse and the whispering tides, corruption. The ash on the ground began to glow. The petrified trees seemed to sigh. The ghostly captain looked at Naruto, and for the first time in 500 years, its form seemed solid. Real. It raised a hand and gave a slow, formal salute. Then, it and the rest of the royal guard began to fade, not violently, but peacefully, like smoke dissolving into the air. Their centuries of rage finally released. The caldera fell silent. The oppressive, soul-crushing grief that had blanketed the island for half a millennium was gone. A single, weak ray of real sunlight broke through the swirling storm clouds above, a golden spear that struck the center of the citadel. When they returned to the throne room, the Ashen Queen was on her feet, staring out a window. For the first time in centuries, a patch of blue sky was visible above her island. The eternal fall of ash had ceased. She turned to them, and the hard, bitter mask was gone. Her ancient eyes were filled with tears. You didn't fight them," she whispered in awe. "You saved them. Their fight was over," Naruto said. "They just needed someone to tell them." The queen walked to him. Her movements no longer frail but filled with a renewed strength. "I have held on to my hate for centuries. I thought it was all I had left. You have shown me a greater power." She led them to a hidden chamber behind her throne. In the center, on a simple stone pedestal, rested a fist-sized, spiraling piece of obsidian that seemed to absorb the light, leaving a perfect blackness. It felt wrong. She hummed with an energy that was the antithesis of the natural world. "This is the lodestone of dissonance," the queen explained. "It is not a weapon of power, but of disharmony. Our ancestors created it to sever connections. We tried to use it to sever the sovereign from his own life, but he was too strong." She looked at Naruto. "But we were wrong. His true strength is not his own body. It is his bond to the heart of the sea, a nexus of immense life energy at the deepest point of the ocean. He is a parasite, drawing his divinity from the very lifeblood of this world. He is not a god of the ocean, he is its jailer." She gestured to the lodestone. "This cannot kill him, but if you can get it to the heart, it will sever his connection. It will cut him off from his source of power. It will make a god mortal." Naruto reached out and took the lodestone. It was cold, and its silent, anti-energy hummed in his hand. He had it, the key, the path to victory. As they sailed away from the Isle of Whispers, they looked back. The great, swirling storm that had shrouded the island for 500 years was breaking apart, dissipated by the return of life and hope to the land. The sun was shining on the gray shores for the first time. They had their weapon. They had their target. The war had been a desperate defense. Now, it was about to become a hunt. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Price of a Crown and the Betrayal of an Ally. The sea was calm, a rare gift in these troubled waters. A sense of determined optimism had settled over the fleet. They had a weapon, a destination, and a purpose. The victory at the Isle of Whispers had washed away the despair of the sovereign's attack, replacing it with a hard-won resolve. In the central strategy room aboard Haine's flagship, the Forgeheart, the mood was focused. The lodestone of dissonance sat on the table, a point of perfect blackness that seemed to drink the light. Around it, the leaders of the Alliance planned their final assault. The coordinates provided by the Ashen Queen place the heart of the sea here, Sora stated, indicating a spot on the holographic map deep within a treacherous region known as the Serpent's Maw, a maze of underwater trenches and volatile geothermal vents. It is the deepest known point in the Grand Sea. The pressure alone would crush a normal vessel. Our ironclads can be modified to withstand it, for a time, Kenji said, tracing a line on the map. And the Aquan submersibles are designed for such depths. But our descent will not go unnoticed. The Sovereign will throw everything he has at us, Anya agreed. Sea monsters, currents, the very water itself. This will be a brute force assault. We need a spearhead. I will be that spearhead, Naruto said simply. I'll take the lodestone down. The rest of you will run interference. Keep his attention divided. Create a path for me. Kale, who had been studying the map with a quiet intensity, finally spoke. It's not enough, he said, his voice a low growl. Your plan is based on defense. On reaction. The Sovereign is a god of this world. We cannot simply knock on his door and expect him to let us in. We must be the bigger storm. We must strike with such overwhelming, ruthless force that he has no time to react. Zara looked at him, a slight frown touching her lips. That is the logic of conquest, Kale. We are on a surgical strike, not a rampage. A surgeon's blade is useless against a tidal wave, Kale shot back, his gaze intense. Naruto's mercy, his restraint, it is a weakness the sovereign will exploit. When we reach the heart, we will have one chance. We must be prepared to do whatever it takes to win. Absolutely anything. There was a hard, fanatical glint in his eyes that hadn't been there since the duel in Shirima. Naruto felt a faint, dissonant hum from him. A barely perceptible flicker of the same dark energy he'd purged before. He dismissed it as a phantom, a lingering echo. Kale was passionate, aggressive, it was his nature. He was an ally now. We'll do what it takes, Naruto said, his voice placating. But we'll do it our way. Together. Kale fell silent, but his jaw was tight, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. He gave a curt nod, but his eyes never left the lodestone. Later, as they navigated a narrow, fog-shrouded channel between two towering sea stacks, Zara found Kale alone. On the deck of his Shuriman command ship. Your words in the council troubled me, she said, her voice soft. It sounded like the man I knew before Kai Shur. That man knew that victory has a price, Kale replied, not looking at her. He stared out into the fog, his expression grim. Naruto is a good man. He may even be a great one. But he is not a king. A king cannot afford to see the good in his enemies. He cannot offer a hand to those who would stab him in the back. This softness, this hope, it will get us all killed. His softness saved you, Kale, Zara reminded him gently. Kale flinched as if struck. He showed me I was wrong, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. But what if I wasn't? What if my only mistake was that I wasn't strong enough? The fog around them seemed to thicken. The whispers of the wind sounding almost like words. He is weak. You are strong. The world needs a true king. One who is not afraid to claim his power. To take it. Kale shook his head, as if to clear it. The sovereign must be stopped. That is all that matters. He turned and walked away, leaving Zara feeling a profound sense of unease. The ambush came without warning. They were exiting the channel. The fleet reforming in the open sea, when it happened. Kale's flagship, the Desert Sun, suddenly opened fire. Not on an unseen enemy, but on Anya's ship, the Sea Strider. Golden bolts of concentrated solar energy, a Shuriman specialty, slammed into its hull, splintering wood and sending sailors scrambling. Simultaneously, a dozen other Shuriman vessels, a faction of their fleet that had always been loyal to Kale personally, broke formation and turned their guns on the rest of the alliance. The betrayal was so sudden, so absolute, that for a moment no one could react. Kale, what is the meaning of this? Zara's voice, amplified by an Eridorian crystal, boomed across the water, filled with fury and disbelief. Kale stood on the prow of his ship, his face a mask of grim resolve. A faint, dark purple aura, the telltale sign of the whispering tides, now coiled around him, visible to Naruto's sage senses. The tides had not just reinfected him, they had been nurturing his doubt. Twisting his ambition into a righteous crusade. I am doing what must be done. He yelled back, his voice resonating with a terrible conviction. Naruto's way is the path to failure. He seeks to re-ascend with a force that only understands power. I will not let his weakness doom us all. The battle erupted. It was a chaotic, heartbreaking brawl. Friends who had been sharing meals hours earlier were now firing cannons at each other. The cohesive fleet fractured into a swirling melee of desperate skirmishes. All ships, defensive formation. Anya roared, her own vessel listing. Target the engines of the traitor vessels. Disable. Do not destroy. Sora, her face a mask of cold fury, directed her skiffs with deadly precision, their kinetic blasts creating shimmering shields to protect the allied ships from the worst of the barrage. Hina and Kenji charged their ironclads forward, their immense bulk acting as a mobile wall between Kale's forces and the more vulnerable ships. Naruto stood on the deck of the Forgeheart, the wind whipping his cloak. He watched Kale, and the sorrow he felt was a physical weight. He thinks he's the hero, he said, his voice filled with a quiet anguish. The tides are telling him this is the only way. Then he is a fool who must be put down. Kenji snarled, his hand on his sword. No, Naruto said, his gaze hardening. He's our ally. And I'm going to bring him back. He shot into the air. A golden blur heading directly for the desert sun. Kale saw him coming. He stomped his foot, and a massive column of sand and seawater, dredged from the ocean floor, erupted to meet him. Naruto flew through it, his aura protecting him. He landed on Kale's ship. The traitorous Shuriman soldiers charged him, but Naruto didn't even look at them. He released a single, gentle pulse of chakra, and they all collapsed, unconscious. His fight was not with them. Kale stood alone on the forecastle, his great curved blade now in his hands. The dark aura around him intensified. I knew you would come, Kale said, always predictable, always choosing the honorable path. This isn't honorable, Kale. This is madness. Naruto yelled over the din of the battle. The tides are using you. They are not using me. They have opened my eyes. Kale roared, his own eyes beginning to glow with a faint, purple light. They have shown me what true strength is. The power of T. He heart of the sea should not be neutralized by the lodestone. It should be claimed, wielded by a king strong enough to command it. I will take that power, destroy the sovereign, and bring a true, lasting peace to this world. An order forged by my will. He charged, his speed enhanced by the dark energy. His blade, wreathed in grinding sand, swung in a vicious arc. Naruto summoned a truth-seeking staff, blocking the blow. The impact sent a shockwave that cracked the deck beneath them. You'd become a tyrant, just like the sovereign. Naruto grunted, pushing him back. A benevolent one. Kale snarled, his attacks coming faster. More ferociously. He was stronger than he'd been in the arena, his movements more fluid, his power augmented by the parasitic whispers. Sand swirled around him, forming into razor-sharp projectiles that forced Naruto onto the defensive. While they fought, the naval battle raged. Zara, her face a mask of cold fury, personally led a boarding party onto one of the traitor ships. She moved with the deadly grace of a desert viper, her twin blades a blur, disarming soldiers with a precision that was both beautiful and terrifying. This is not the will of Shurima, she cried, her voice ringing with the authority of a true queen. You follow a man lost to madness. Marina, from the water, was a goddess of the currents. She guided torpedoes from the Aquan subs away from their targets and created whirlpools that spun Kale's ships around, leaving them vulnerable. The Alliance, though caught by surprise, was fighting with a desperate, unified fury. They were GHTING for the dream they had all committed to. Naruto was being pushed back. He was holding back, trying not to fatally injure Kale, but Kale had no such reservations. A blast of hardened sand struck Naruto's shoulder, staggering him. You see, Kale panted, a wild, ecstatic look on his face. Your hesitation is your undoing. To win, you must be willing to kill. No, Naruto yelled, his golden aura flaring. To win, I just have to save you from yourself. He created a dozen shadow clones. They didn't attack. They swarmed Kale, grappling him, holding his arms, his legs, trying to pin him down. Kale roared in fury, the dark aura exploding outwards, disintegrating the clones. But it was the opening the original needed. Naruto appeared in front of him, his hand glowing not with a Rasengan, but with the same gentle, purifying light he had used on the echoes. He thrust his palm onto Kale's chest. Kale screamed. It was a sound of both physical and spiritual agony. Naruto wasn't just pushing against his body. He was pushing against the entity that had its hooks in his soul. In his mind's eye, Naruto could see it, a shadowy, tentacled thing made of pure despair and ambition, wrapped around Kale's spirit. He poured his sage chakra into it, a cleansing fire of pure, positive life energy. The dark entity shrieked, its grip tightening. Kale's body convulsed, arcs of purple and gold energy crackling around him. He struggled, trying to throw Naruto off, his eyes wide with a mixture of his own rage and the entity's terror. Fight it, Kale, Naruto grunted, the strain immense. Remember who you are, a protector, not a conqueror. Zara's voice suddenly cut through the chaos, amplified and projected right beside them. Kale, listen to him. This path is not yours. It leads only to a throne of ashes. Her voice, a link to his past, to his honor, seemed to reach the real Kale, buried beneath the corruption. He faltered for a second. His struggles weakened. It was the opening Naruto needed. With a final, Desperate roar. Naruto unleashed a massive wave of purifying chakra. The shadowy entity was burned away, dissolving into nothingness with a final, psychic scream. Kale's eyes rolled back in his head, the purple light fading from them. The dark aura around him vanished. He collapsed, unconscious, into Naruto's arms. With his fall, the will of the traitor fleet shattered. Seeing their leader defeated, faced with the combined, furious might of the alliance, they surrendered. The battle was over. Silence descended, broken only by the crackle of fires and the groans of damaged ships. The victory felt like a funeral. They had won, but they had been forced to turn their swords on their own. Naruto laid Kale gently on the deck. Zara rushed to his side, her face a storm of conflicting emotions, relief, sorrow, anger. The Whispering Tides had just dealt them their most grievous blow. They hadn't sunk a single ship that couldn't be repaired. But they had sunk the easy trust. The confident optimism that had carried the alliance this far. They had proven that the greatest threat was not the god waiting for them in the depths, but the darkness that lurked within their own hearts. The road to the Serpent's Maw was clear, but now it was paved with the ashes of betrayal. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The God of the Seas and the King of Men. The descent into the Serpent's Maw was a journey into a hostile, alien world. The sunlight vanished, replaced by an oppressive, crushing darkness broken only by the searchlights of the fleet and the eerie, shifting glow of geothermal vents. The water pressure groaned against the reinforced hulls of the Fireland's ironclads, which acted as armored shepherds for the nimbler Aquan submersibles. Sora's skiff, the Eris, had been encased in a custom-built, pressure-resistant shell, a crystalline pearl protected by a brutish steel oyster. Inside the command bridge of the Forgeheart, the mood was somber and tense. Kale was confined to his quarters, awake but stripped of his command, guarded by Zara's most loyal men. The shame and guilt radiating from him were a palpable cloud, but there was no time for absolution. Every crew member, every captain, every queen, was focused on the impossible task ahead. The betrayal had stripped them of their innocence, but it had left behind a core of hardened, unshakable resolve. "We are approaching the coordinates," Sora's voice announced over the comms, her tone clipped and precise. "Pressure is reaching critical levels. Life form readings are astronomical. He knows we're here." Naruto stood at the forward view port, his hand resting on the cool, thick glass. He held the lodestone of dissonance in his other hand. It felt like a hole in reality, its anti-energy a stark contrast to the overwhelming life force he could now feel gathering ahead of them. The heart of the sea. And its guardian. Anya, Zara. Naruto's voice was calm, but it commanded the attention of the entire fleet. "Keep the fleet in a defensive perimeter. Draw his attention. Hina, Kenji, you're with me. We're the battering ram. Sora, Marina, you're my eyes and ears. Pinpoint the heart for me." "Understood," came the chorus of determined replies. The seabed fell away into a trench of absolute blackness. And from that blackness, they rose. The Sovereign's true army. Not mindless beasts, but chimerical horrors. Born of arcane science and twisted nature. Colossal crabs with shells of razor-sharp obsidian, swarms of viper-like eels that crackled with bioelectricity, and looming in the background, the terrifying kraken-like shapes of things that had not been seen in the world for millennia. Each one had the same malevolent, glowing red eyes of the Leviathan. The battle began without a word. The sea became a maelstrom of light and violence. Fireland's ships unleashed torrents of superheated steam, boiling the water and flash-cooking the smaller creatures. Shuriken cannons fired bolts of concentrated sunlight that lanced through the darkness, incinerating whatever they hit. The Aquan subs moved like ghosts, their torpedoes striking with deadly precision. It was a battle against an endless tide. For every monster they killed, 3 more rose from the depths. "So, the insects have come to be crushed in person," the Sovereign's voice echoed, not through the water, but directly inside their minds. It was calm, amused. The voice of a being swatting at a nuisance. "Your defiance is as predictable as it is pointless. You cannot comprehend what you are fighting." "We don't need to comprehend you," Naruto projected back, his own voice a blaze of golden energy. "We just need to beat you." Hina, and Kenji transferred to a heavily armored Aquan submersible, the Trident, which detached from the Forgeheart and began its final suicidal dive into the heart of the enemy swarm. The trident was a spear aimed at a god's heart. It plowed through smaller creatures, its reinforced hull groaning under the impacts of larger ones. Torpedoes launched from its tubes, clearing a path. Naruto stood in the observation dome, the lodestone in hand, his sage mode a beacon in the crushing dark. I have it, Sora's voice crackled through the calm. There is a massive convergence of energy directly below you. A cave system. The heart is within. Marina, can you get us through? Naruto asked. The currents are a trap, Marina replied. He is twisting them, creating vortexes. But there is a path. Follow my lead. Guided by Marina's innate connection to the ocean, the trident danced an impossible ballet through the chaos. It dodged colossal tentacles, rode the edge of a newly formed whirlpool, and slipped through a gap between two monstrous, colliding leviathans. They found the entrance to the cave system. It was a gaping maw in the trench wall, and from it pulsed a soft, life-giving blue light, the light of the heart of the sea. But guarding it was the sovereign's royal guard. Two of them, behemoths had made the leviathan Naruto had faced look like an infant. One was a titanic, turtle-like creature with a mountain of a shell covered in glowing, explosive barnacles. The other was a serpent of impossible length, its body wreathed in an aura of pure, freezing energy. You will come no further, anomaly, the sovereign's voice intoned. Hina and Kenji looked at Naruto. A silent understanding passed between them. We'll handle these, Kenji said, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. The Forge-born do not flee a worthy challenge. Go, Hina said, her face grim. Fulfill your promise. Protect our world. Naruto gave a single, grateful nod. As the trident shot past the two guardians, the main hatch of the submersible blew open. Hina and Kenji, encased in experimental, steam-powered diving AR. More forged in the heart of their volcano, shot out into the water. Each suit was a masterpiece of engineering, a miniature ironclad with enough power to fight a titan. They were living anvils, and were about to meet the sovereign's hammers. Naruto didn't look back. He trusted them. He shot out of the submersible's forward torpedo tube, encased in a bubble of his own chakra, the lodestone held tight against his chest. He was a golden bullet fired into the heart of the darkness. He entered the cave. The walls were lined with crystals that pulsed with the gentle, blue light. The water was still, reverent, and in the center of a vast, cathedral-like cavern, it floated. The heart of the sea. It was a sphere of pure, condensed life energy, 100 meters in diameter. It was a captured star, the source of all life in this world's oceans. It was beautiful, serene, and powerful beyond comprehension. And chained to it, drawing power from it through shimmering, ethereal conduits, was the sovereign. He was not a being of water or cloud. In his sanctum, he was corporeal. He was an elegant, regal figure, impossibly tall and slender, with skin the color of pale coral and long, flowing hair like white sea foam. His eyes were twin pools of cold, intelligent darkness. He was not a monster. He was a king, and this was his throne room. So, the sovereign said, his real voice a smooth, mellow, thick baritone that held no echo of the booming god voice he used outside. The little stray has finally reached the center of the web. He looked at the lodestone in Naruto's hand. And you have brought a bauble to threaten me with. How quaint. Your reign is over, Naruto said, his truth-seeking orbs fanning out behind him. You're a parasite, leeching off the life of this world. The sovereign actually laughed, a genuinely amused, condescending sound. Leeching. I am its caretaker, its master. The heart's power is chaotic, untamed. It promotes endless, cancerous growth. I give it purpose. I shape it. I maintain the elegant, brutal balance of this world. Without me, the seas would devolve into a primordial soup of evolutionary chaos. He spread his hands. I am not its jailer, little stray. I am its god. He floated off his throne, the conduits of power pulsing. But you have proven to be a persistent nuisance. I believe it is time I tidied up. He flicked a finger. The water in the sea. Avern instantly solidified into 1,000 spears of razor-sharp, hyper-dense ice, all aimed at Naruto. Naruto's truth-seeking orbs formed a perfect shield, the spears shattering against it. He shot forward, Rasenshuriken already forming. The sovereign simply waved a hand, and a wall of pure, kinetic force, a solid piece of the ocean's pressure, slammed into Naruto, stopping him dead. Your power is impressive, the sovereign admitted. For a mortal. But I am connected to an infinite source. I can do this all day. Can you? The battle for the fate of the world began. It was a clash of two diametrically opposed forces. Naruto was a whirlwind of focused, explosive power. Rasengans, tailed beast bombs, sage arts that bent the laws of physics. The sovereign was a being of absolute, effortless control. He didn't seem to attack. He simply commanded the environment to kill. The water became a weapon. The pressure became a fist. The cold became a blade. Outside, the fleet was engaged in a desperate, grinding war of attrition. Anya directed the battle with a cold, ruthless efficiency, her voice never betraying the terror she felt. Zara's forces acted as the unbreakable spine of the fleet, taking the brunt of the assault. Hina and Kenji's battle was a saga in its own right. Kenji, his armor glowing red-hot, engaged the titanic serpent, his superheated fists vaporizing the water around them, creating pockets of steam that disoriented the beast. Hina, her movements slower but impossibly powerful, had managed to climb onto the shell of the turtle guardian. She was using her ceremonial hammer, now glowing with the white-hot energy of her suit's core, to systematically shatter the explosive barnacles, enduring the concussive blasts with sheer, unbending will. They were holding the line. In the heart's chamber, Naruto was beginning to tire. He had landed blows, searing the sovereign's flesh with his sage arts, but the being regenerated instantly, drawing on the limitless energy of the heart. Your friends are dying, the sovereign taunted, as a psychic vision of the brutal battle outside flashed in Naruto's mind. Their ships are breaking. Their hope is failing, all because you Avenue them a reason to fight a battle they could never win. Their deaths are on your hands. Don't you dare talk about my friends. Naruto roared, a surge of rage giving him new strength. He entered his Kurama avatar form, a colossal fox of golden chakra that filled the cavern, its sheer power making the very water boil. Ah, the beast within, the sovereign said, unimpressed. He raised a hand, and a perfect, shimmering sphere of anti-energy, a void in reality, formed in his palm. It was a power drawn from the deepest, coldest, most lifeless part of the abyss. He threw it. It met the Kurama avatar's tailed beast bomb. There was no explosion. The two attacks annihilated each other in a flash of silent, world-erasing light. The feedback threw Naruto out of his avatar form, leaving him battered and panting. He was losing. He looked at the lodestone. He had to get to the heart. He poured all his remaining energy into his speed, blitzing past the sovereign in a golden flash. He was inches away, his hand outstretched. The lodestone ready. A shimmering wall of force appeared before him. He slammed into it and was thrown back, landing hard at the sovereign's feet. The god looked down at him, his expression one of finality. It is over. You have fought well, but in the end, you are just a man. And I am a god. He raised his hand to deliver the final, killing blow. He's not just a man. The voice was not in Naruto's head. It was in the cavern. A single, pure note in the symphony of chaos. A new energy signature flared to life, not outside, but inside the chamber. A portal of swirling, crystalline light tore open behind the sovereign. And from it stepped Sora, her silver hair flying, her eyes blazing with cold, analytical fury. In her hands was the main power core of the Eris, a crystal the size of a man's torso. Pulsing with an unstable, terrifying light. She had teleported them both directly into the sanctum. What is this? The sovereign demanded, turning, genuinely startled for the first time. A variable you did not account for, Sora said, her voice ice. At the same instant, a whirlpool of sand and water erupted from the cavern floor. Kale and Zara emerged from it, their faces grim and determined. Kale, free from his prison, his eyes clear and filled with a desperate need for atonement. A king protects his people. He roared, and launched himself at the sovereign. The sovereign, caught between three unexpected threats, was momentarily distracted. It was all Naruto needed. Sora overloaded the Eris's core. It didn't explode. It released a single, focused beam of pure, refined energy, the same purifying light she had used on the Leviathan, but 1,000 times more powerful. It struck not the sovereign, but one of the ethereal conduits connecting him to the heart. The conduit shattered like glass. The sovereign cried out in pain and shock, his power flickering. Kale and Zara attacked together, a whirlwind of sand and steel, forcing him back, away from the heart. Naruto saw his chance. It was not a moment for power. It was a moment for a promise. He flew forward, ignoring the sovereign, and slammed the lodestone of dissonance into the surface of the heart of the sea. The effect was immediate and absolute. The lodestone did not explode. It simply worked. A wave of pure, silent anti-energy washed over the heart. The remaining conduits connecting the sovereign to it dissolved into dust. The sovereign screamed, a raw, agonized sound of pure loss. The limitless power that had defined him for centuries was gone. He was cut off. The blue, life-giving light of the heart, now freed, flared brilliantly, washing the cavern in a wave of pure, untainted life. The sovereign stumbled, his form flickering. The divine energy that sustained him was fading. He looked at his hands. Then at Naruto, his eyes filled with a new, terrifying emotion. Fear. What have you done? He whispered, his voice no longer that of a god, but of a man. I gave the world back to its people, Naruto said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Kale stepped forward, his blade ready. Now, you will pay for your arrogance. No, Naruto said, holding up a hand. He looked at the being before him. No longer a god, just a very old, very powerful man who had lost his purpose. It's over. The sovereign looked at the freed, radiant heart, then at the determined faces of the mortals who had dethroned him. He had lost. His perfect, ordered world was gone. Without the heart, his own life force would fade within hours. He gave a single, tired sigh. And then he simply dissolved, not into water, but into harmless sea foam, his essence returning to the ocean he had tried to rule. The god was dead. The battle was over. The silence in the cavern was absolute. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The dawn of a new era. The ascent from the serpent's maw was not triumphant. It was a slow, wounded procession. The remnants of the grand fleet, battered and scarred, rose from the crushing depths into the welcoming light of the sun. The battle had been won. The god was dead, but the cost was etched into the hull of every ship, into the weary faces of every sailor. When Naruto emerged onto the deck of the Forgeheart, the assembled crews from every vessel that could still float let out a cheer. It was not a roar of victory, but a raw, emotional cry of survival and relief. He stood there, flanked by the women who had become his pillars, Anya, Sora, Zara, Marina, and Hina, and the rival who had become his redemption, Kale. They were exhausted, bruised, but they were whole. And they were together. The heart of the sea, now freed from its chains, pulsed with a gentle, life-giving rhythm that could be felt across the entire ocean. The sea itself felt cleaner, more vibrant. The age of the sovereign was over. The journey back to the Crimson Dawn archipelago was a time of healing, both for the ships and their crews. Fireland smiths worked alongside Eridorian technicians, patching holes with a fusion of enchanted steel and kinetic plating. Shuriman healers tended to the wounded, their desert remedies proving surprisingly effective. A new kind of camaraderie was forged in the quiet aftermath of the storm. A bond built not on treaties or proposals, but on shared sacrifice. Kale was a ghost of his former self. He worked tirelessly, taking on the most grueling repair tasks, his movements fueled by a silent, burning need for atonement. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his voice was heavy with the weight of his betrayal. The other crews, at first, treated him with a cold suspicion. But Anya, in her quiet wisdom, assigned his loyalist Shuriman soldiers to work side by side with the very crews they had fired upon. Tempers flared, but under the watchful eyes of their leaders, resentment slowly gave way to a grudging respect born of shared labor. The wounds were deep, but they were beginning to scar over. Their return was not to the ravaged, temporary camp of the summit, but to a new beginning. In their absence, under the direction of Anya's uncle and the remaining island leaders, the foundations of a new city were being laid on the main island. It was a city designed from the ground up to be the heart of the alliance. Eridorian architects planned its gravity-defying spires, Shuriman engineers laid out its water-conserving sunken gardens, and its central structures were being forged from the Fireland's strongest volcanic rock. It was a city named Unity. The first official meeting of the Grand Council was held not in a silken pavilion, but in the open air, Amy. DST the bustling construction of their new capital. Representatives from dozens of smaller islands, hearing of the sovereign's defeat, had come to pledge their allegiance. The small circle of 5 kin. GDOMS was becoming a true world government. Naruto, who had been offered the central seat, refused. He dragged it to the side and sat down, leaving the center of the circle open. "This isn't my throne," he said, his voice carrying in the clear air. "There is no throne. We rule together, or we don't rule at all." The council began, a long and arduous process of creation. They drafted a charter, established trade laws, and created a unified defense force. Sora, with her peerless logic, designed the system. Zara, with her economic cunning, funded it. Hina's forges would arm it, and Anya's naval expertise would command it. Each of them found their role, their purpose magnified by the strength of the others. One evening, as the sun set, casting a brilliant orange glow that reminded him achingly of home, Naruto stood on the cliffs overlooking the sea. The weight on his shoulders, the crushing burden of crowns and responsibility, was still there. But it no longer felt like a weight that would break him. It felt familiar, like the mantle of Hokage he had once dreamed of. "It's a heavy burden, isn't it?" Zara's voice was soft beside him. She stood there, her crimson silks a stark contrast to his simple attire. "The heaviest," he admitted, "but I'm not carrying it alone anymore." She was silent for a moment. "Kale wishes to speak with you. He asked me to ask you. He does not feel he has the right to approach you himself." Naruto found Kale on the beach, skipping stones across the impossibly calm water. The setting sun painted his silhouette against the waves. "I have no words to ask for your forgiveness," Kale said without turning around. "My actions were unforgivable." "They weren't your actions," Naruto said, walking to stand beside him. "Not entirely. The whispering tides, they prey on the doubts we all have. Your mistake wasn't ambition. It was thinking you had to achieve it alone." Kale finally turned to face him, his eyes filled with a profound, humbled sorrow. "The council has offered me a position. Commander of the new exploration corps. To chart the unknown seas. To be the first line of defense against new threats." He shook his head. "I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves a second chance, Kale." Naruto said, "I got one when I came to this world. Now it's your turn. Don't waste it." He held out his hand. "Besides, I'll need someone I can trust to watch my back out there." Kale stared at the offered hand, the same hand that had pulled him up in the arena, the same hand that had purged the darkness from his soul. This time, when he took it, it was not with the reluctance of a defeated rival, but with the firm, unwavering grip of a loyal friend. Later that night, the 5 women found him in the same spot. His fiancées, his queens, the architects of this new world. They stood with him in a comfortable silence, watching the stars, which were no longer alien to him, but the familiar ceiling of his new home. "You know," Anya said, breaking the silence, her voice laced with wry amusement. "We never actually had a wedding." Sora sniffed disdainfully. "Weddings are inefficient, sentimental rituals." But there was a distinct lack of her usual icy conviction. "Our people have a ceremony of braided sea kelp," Marina offered softly. "It signifies a bond that cannot be broken by any storm." "In the Firelands, we forge rings," Hina said. "2 pieces of metal, made stronger by being joined as one." Zara simply smiled. "And in Shurima, a simple exchange of vows under the open sky is all that is required." Naruto looked at each of them. Anya, the pragmatic anchor who had first given him a purpose here. Sora, the brilliant mind who challenged him to be smarter. Marina, the gentle heart who taught him the strength of empathy. Hina, the unbreakable evil who showed him the power of creation. And Zara, the cunning strategist who saw the king in him before he saw it himself. He had been forced into this, a political pawn in an ancient tradition. He had lost his world, his home, his past. But as he stood here, surrounded by these incredible women, the sea calm and a new world rising behind him, he realized he hadn't just built a kingdom. He had, against all odds, found a family. He had found a home. "Then I guess," Naruto said, a wide, genuine, Uzumaki grin spreading across his face for the first time in what felt like an eternity, "we have 5 weddings to plan." The adventure was over. The great evil was defeated. But the journey, the long, difficult, and wonderful journey of building a better world, had just begun. And for the first time, Naruto Uzumaki, the sage of the 6 paths, the hero of the fourth great ninja war, and the pirate king of the Grand Sea, felt truly, completely at peace. The dawn of the new era was bright, and he was ready to face it. Chapter 10 End.